Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is slightly after 10 o'clock, and I think we might be able to call our meeting to order. Are we ready? How's our
This is
technology?
Peralta. We're ready.
Excellent. Our technology is good. I am going to initially turn this over to former chair Ting Sun and allow her to open it up for us.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Dean Sun. So, as you all know, I was former chair of this committee, and with the new year, we have a new transition. This is part of our partnership with the community colleges, and we actually share the chair position with our community college partners and every other year. So since we are starting the year, Jolina Gonde is from the Community College's Board of Governors, and she has graciously accepted the chair of this committee in 2019. So, and I am happy to continue serving as vice chair.
There is nothing that gives me greater pleasure than to sit next to Ting and know that she is right here next to me as I learn the nuances of this committee. And I want to start by thanking you so much for helping to launch us over the last couple of years. You and Vice Chair Pamela Haynes from the Community College's Board of Governors as well. Your service has been invaluable, and I hope that I follow in your footsteps and I am just as effective. You're very welcome. For the rest, I ask that I actually beg your indulgence and your patience as I get up to speed and let you know that I am very, very happy to join this committee, and it is a privilege to serve as chair for 2019. I have a very, very deep love of career technical education that spans almost my entire life, and I am very excited to help California prepare to submit the new state plan as required by the Federal Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act. That is a mouthful. We'll just call it Perkins 5 and ensure that our state plan complements the good work already underway in all of our state initiatives. And we will be receiving updates on those items today. Today's meeting is a teleconference with Oakland, and although I can't see you, Amy Costa, are you there? Amy, are you with us? Please don't mute Amy. She's amazing and has so much to offer. Excellent. Thank you very much. Because I need to ask Amy not only to introduce herself, I need her to verify that the public meeting notice was posted at our remote location in Oakland. And also, if anyone is interested, this is being webcast through the CDE website. So while we're waiting to find where Amy is, if anyone is interested in viewing this webcast, let me give you the URL. It's cde.ca.videossc.com. And it will also be archived and available in about a week after the short captioning is completed. But if you'd like to observe this meeting via our live webcast, the URL is cde.ca.videossc.com. Coming back, Amy, are you with us?
Yes, I'm sorry. I disconnected myself instead of unmuting myself. I'm not the most technologically savvy, but I'm here.
It is a Friday, and we are just so happy that you're with us down in Oakland. Would you do me a favor and introduce yourself and verify for me, please, that the public meeting notice has been posted?
Absolutely. This is Amy Costa with the Board of Governors, and I can verify the public meeting notice has been posted.
Thank you so much, Amy. We must have a quorum in order to conduct business, and I clearly see that I have 3 other members to my right and Amy on the phone. So with 5 members in attendance, including Amy, I will call this meeting to order. I next would like to welcome someone who is not here, unfortunately. Kristen McGuire from the Young Invincibles is our newest ex officio member. And she unfortunately had her flight delayed, so she is not with us today, but we would like to welcome her. All right. How about for other members up here? We've had the introduction from Amy. Would you like to introduce each of yourselves as well?
Felisa Ortiz Licon with the State Board of Education.
Mon Fan with the Board of Governors of the California Community Colleges.
Ting needs no further introduction. I am Jolina Grande, a member of the Board of Governors with the California Community Colleges. And one last thing, because I love this mute button up here and I'd like to mute myself. I need to make sure that Oakland keeps the line muting when they are not speaking. It helps cut down on the interference. All right, so moving on to approval of meeting minutes. I would like to seek approval for a few of our previous meeting minutes, and I hope you don't mind. I'm going to ask for them one at a time. So from the committee members in attendance, is there anyone that would like to offer up a motion to approve the meeting minutes for September 19th, 2018?
I move with one correction. My last name is spelled P-H-A-N as in Nancy, not M as written.
Thank you for that motion, Board Member Fan. Is there a second to the motion? Thank you very much. Now that we have a motion and a second, other than the slight correction that Member Fawn had offered, is there any other corrections to the minutes that need to be made or noted? Any other comments regarding the meeting minutes from September 19th? Very well then. Amy, any comments from your end?
No, I don't have any comments.
Hearing none, I believe we are ready for a vote. The Bagley King Open Meeting Act requires that we vote by roll call, so I'll turn this over to CDE staff member to take our roll.
Member Costa?
Here. And I.
Member Grande?
I will abstain. I was not present for the September 19th meeting.
Member Ortiz Licon? Member Fawn?
Aye.
Member Sun?
Aye.
I believe that motion does indeed pass. Now, I will entertain a motion from any of the members for the meeting minute approval of November 26th, 2018. I just need a motion at the moment. You don't have to vote in favor of it to provide the motion.
I'll move.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? The motion will die for lack of a second. You don't have to vote in favor of it to provide the second. Thank you very much. The motion has been made and seconded properly. Are there any comments or revisions that need to be suggested for the meeting minutes of November 26th? You do not have to vote in favor of them. You can abstain without having been there for them, but you can still suggest potential edits. Hearing no edits, Amy, are you okay with the meeting minutes of November 26th? You do not necessarily have to vote in favor of them. You may abstain. I just need to make sure that there are no corrections to them.
I don't have any corrections, and working off of your previous vote, Madam Chair, I'm going to abstain because I was not present.
Very well. Are there any other comments or edits for the meeting minutes before we move to a vote?
I will also abstain, but note that my last name is spelled P-H-A-N.
Very well. Moving to the vote, the Bagley King Open Meeting Act requires that we vote by roll call, so I will turn this over to our CDE staff member to take the roll.
Member Costa is abstaining. Member Grande?
Abstain.
Member Ortiz Licon? And Member Fawn is abstaining. Member Sun?
Aye.
The motion does indeed pass.
It does?
It does.
Okay.
It does. You do all, as long as you have more in favor than in opposition, abstentions do not count.
Okay. Well.
The next item is a motion for approval of the meeting minutes of December 14th. Again, I'll ask for a motion from members. You don't necessarily have to have been there to introduce the item for discussion. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 14th, 2018?
I'll move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I can second that.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments, edits, suggestions, corrections? All right, I'll start with Amy. Any comments over on the Oakland side of town?
No, we don't have any comments on the minutes.
Thank you. And Board Member Fawn, is there also the need to correct your last name spelling on those as well? Okay, so that takes us through all 3 sets of minutes. The Bagley-King Open Meeting Act requires we vote by roll call, so I will turn this over to the roll call vote if there are no other comments that need to be made. Very well.
Member Costa,
Aye.
Member Grande,
I was not an official member at the time, but I was here for the meeting and I am in approval.
Member Ortiz-Licon, Member Fawn,
Abstain.
Member Sun.
I will approve. I do have, I'm sorry, I should have said that there was a public comment section of these minutes where it indicated a Dr. Jeffrey and then several question marks. I don't know if that is something that we need to correct, or it's a very last
name?
Yeah, last name. Okay.
So we have that Jeff Murzak from the Chancellor's Office made that comment. We will make that change to the minutes.
Okay. So should we try to amend the motion, or do you want?
Will we accept the minutes as amended?
So the amendments, just to be
So moved.
clear, is the change to Dr. Fawn's name of correction of spelling, and then this should be Dr. Jeffrey Morizik. Okay, thank you.
I speak your language.
Okay, and we're, and I'm voting yes, so with those changes.
Very well. I believe all members who did not abstain were accepting of the amended minutes, and I will say that that motion did indeed pass. Looking at today's agenda, we'll begin with a review of the committee's approved guiding policy principles document. We will then receive an update on current state initiatives, the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant, CTIG, and the K-12 Strong Workforce Program. After lunch, we will begin developing the state's transition plan for strengthening career and technical education for the 21st Century Act, which we will affectionately call Perkins 5. So to get us started this morning with the updates and review, I'd like to introduce Patricia DeCoste, Deputy Executive Director from the State Board of Education. She will give us information on the purpose of our committee.
Good morning and welcome, Chair Grande. It's a pleasure to have you here joining us, and Vice Chair Sun and other committee members, including Member Costa. I'm Patricia DeCoste, Deputy Executive Director of the State Board of Education. And just ever so briefly, but for some of you members that are new to this work, I just want to give you just a very brief overview of what the committee has accomplished since it began meeting in March of 2017. We conducted a series of sort of informational meetings beginning in March of 2017, and by the end of that year, December of 2017, we started to draft up some guiding principles document, which you have in your folders. And this, we went, it was presented at the December 17th meeting, again at the March 2018 meeting, partially approved at that meeting, and then finally approved at the May 2018 meeting. That document you have in your folders. It talks about overarching guiding principles that help to guide the work, and it undergirds sort of all of the work of this committee. And we, you know, in presenting a number of informational items in 2017, it was a way for us to understand sort of the new landscape, if you will, in California with regards to career technical education and workforce programs in the state. And it was an important series of meetings for us to all sort of get on the same page, if you will, so that we understood the work and understand how things have changed since the last state Perkins plan was approved by this committee back in 2008. Many things have changed at the community college. You have the Strong Workforce Program that was incorporated as part of the Budget Act. And then last year, the 2018 Budget Act included a K-12 component, and we'll be hearing more about that. On the K-12 side, so many things have changed since 2008. We were during a recession at that time. We now operate, at least the funding for K-12 schools operates under a local control funding formula. We have a number of different things that are very different and culminating with the 2018 Budget Act as well with the Career Technical Incentive Grant. So we have ongoing funds in addition to other funds that are going out. So one of the main principles that I can't emphasize enough is the fact that we would like our state programs to sort of lead the way, and that was one of the principles that was adopted by this joint committee last May. And so want to make sure that we keep that in the forefront of our thinking. And as we begin the discussions around Perkins, we understand that those funds are meant to sort of complement the work, complement all of the fine work that we're already doing in California. So because of the 2018 Budget Act, we embarked on a slightly different process for the Joint Committee, and Dr. Pham was there to participate in the committee's initial deliberations around our metrics for both of those state programs, the state ongoing programs, the K-12 component of the Strong Workforce Program, as well as the CTIG program. So, and that was finally approved at your December meeting. And I know that Member Costa was participating. Chair Grande, you were observing. And so there's been quite a bit of transition to this committee. And as we begin the 2019 year, we are now sort of pivoting again and really looking at in earnest, what are the components that we have to include for our transition plan for the Perkins 5 transition plan. And Donna Wyatt, Director at the California Department of Education, and Matt Roberts from the Chancellor's Office will be providing more information to us in the coming meetings, and some of that will be fleshed out a little bit more today. So with that, I don't know if any of you have any questions, but I just wanted to give a very sort of high-level overview of what this committee has been up to. It's been a pleasure to participate in these and provide some background information to all of you, and I thank you for your time and your interest in this. This is so important. The governor's budget was released yesterday. I know he has a great interest in this particular area, this policy area, so I'm delighted to be part of this. Thank you.
Before you step away,
Madam
let's
Chair,
make
this is
sure
Member Costa. I have a question.
Okay. Before Deputy Executive Director DeCoste walks away, let's go ahead and see if we have any questions from the amazing work that's been done up to this point. Member Costa?
Yeah, I want to thank staff for the overview. It was certainly very helpful in kind of getting me up to speed on the work of the committee. And as noted, we have had some turnover specifically on our community college side. I wanted to seek some clarification on a statement that Patricia made that the state programs will lead the way. Can you explain to me a little bit more what you mean by that?
Yes, happy to do that. And it's a very important point, so I can't underline it enough. What is meant by that is, as you may know, California recently submitted a state ESSA state plan. And what we wanted to make sure that we did with that particular state plan is that the work that California was already doing was going to lead the way, and the federal funds coming to help complement or supplement the ESSA state plan was that, to complement and supplement. Similarly, with these, we have $500 million ongoing investment now for the state CTIG program, and we have a $500 million investment and an additional $14 million investment for the K-12 component of the Strong Workforce Program, in addition to the community college component of the Strong Workforce Program, in addition to all of the other programs. And Donna Wyatt, who's sitting here to my right, can delineate all of the other state programs that we have that we have ongoing funding for. So while the Perkins 5 money, we don't know exactly how much that will be, it really is a small piece of our overall investment. So we want to keep that in sort of the context of what we're doing. We should be leading with our state programs and see how the federal funds complement or supplement our ongoing efforts. Does that help?
Yeah, but I would just make a comment, which is, and I certainly recognize, I know the state board did a lot of work on ESSA and getting that across the finish line, and I don't want to diminish from that work in any way, but it's certainly a flag for me that it doesn't really highlight the work that we've done on the community college side of the equation regarding workforce and workforce investment. And so I would just want to make sure that when we put this forward as a guiding principle, we're really, in principle, I completely agree with which tail is wagging which dog, and that we as a state should be leading this vision forward, because I think we have some really interesting ways that we're approaching workforce development. But I do just want to make sure that the community college side of the house's contributions aren't getting lost in the mix.
Oh, absolutely not. I completely agree with you.
Are there any other questions from members of the Joint Advisory Committee? Hearing none, thank you very much. We appreciate the update. Yeah. All right. I would now like to ask Vice Chair Sun to present the history and development of the committee's guiding policy principles to support K-14 pathways, which were approved by the committee at the March and May 2018 meeting.
Just briefly before we turn it over to Chair Sun, Donna Wyatt, Director of the Career and College Transition Division, I wanted to walk the committee through what you have in your folders.
Oh, please do.
Okay. So on the left-hand side, you will see the facilitator's agenda for today. And then behind that, the 3 sets of minutes from September 19th, 2018, from November 26th, 2018, and then December 14th, 2018. Behind that is a memorandum that we also posted from the Council of Chief State School Officers. This was a memorandum that was released in July of 2018, right after or right before the passage of Perkins 5. And it does an analysis between Perkins 4 and Perkins 5 and points out the key differences between the two federal plans. Behind that document, and we also posted these as well, are the 2 letters from, joint letters from Advanced CTE, which is the organization that represents the state directors for Career Tech Ed, and also the National Organization Association for Career and Technical Education. And this was a joint letter in response to the guide for submission of state plans. It recognizes some of the advantages or the implementations of Perkins 5, but also brings to point some questions and some concerns around the Perkins 5 plan, the guidance. On the right-hand side, what you see at the start is the gold document, which is a copy of our guiding policy principles, as well as the essential elements of college and career pathways, and also our norms for the committee. And then behind that, each of the PowerPoint presentations for today. The first one being presented by Vice Chair Singh, the guiding policy principles, and then as well the summary of public feedback and the PowerPoint that Lisa Reimers will be presenting. And then the update to the state career technical education initiatives, the CTIG and both K through 12 strong workforce. And then finally, the final presentation for today, the strengthening career and technical education for the 21st century. Yes, Perkins 5. So just to make you aware of what is all there. And then the final document is a summary of the requirements for the draft transition plan that is due to the feds in April of this year. So, okay, questions? Okay.
Well, thank you. Before you step away,
Okay.
thank you so much, Donna, for walking us through what's in our folders in front of us. For Member Costa, who is remote, I wanted to make sure that she indeed had all of these documents as well. Amy, do you have the documents that Donna just listed for us?
I do. Thank you.
Excellent. Board Member Fawn?
Yes, since you brought it up, Donna, could you very briefly highlight the difference between the Perkin 4 and Perkin 5?
I'm actually going to do that in the presentation.
Oh, in the presentation later.
To talk to you about the essential questions that we need, that we need you to address for us and give us recommendations and guidance on. But in that presentation, I will be talking about the primary differences between
Wonderful.
the two initiatives.
Thank you. I will wait then.
Thank you.
Will you wait for that presentation then? Excellent. Then let's go ahead and continue on, and I will ask Vice Chair Sun if she would like to give us an overview of the guiding policy principles.
All right, terrific. Thank you for this opportunity. So with the beginning school year, the year, and with some changes on our committee, we thought it'd be a good idea to take a few steps back and talk a little bit about how these principles were developed. And in doing so, I'm just going to take even a couple more steps back and perhaps maybe cover a little bit of ground that Patricia DeCoste also had covered. So just real quickly, I've never done this where I've had to push the before. Okay, all right. So it's important, I think, first to point out that the Joint Advisory Committee of the State Board of Education and the Community College Board of Governors is not new. It was actually established under Ed Code in the 1970s to aid in the support of planning and coordinating of vocational education and training programs. And as former President Mike Kearse would say, he chaired this committee back in the 70s. And we've changed quite a bit. So its original charge to review and comment on proposals, policies, and procedures and the allocation of funds related to what was called Voc Ed has really changed quite a bit. In response to the changing times, current workforce needs, and we now have a new and, I think, improved committee with us as members, and we've embraced a mission that is broader than what was originally outlined in Education Code. I see our work as promoting high-quality CDE programs, and that we are in fact shaping the preparation of youth to. I'm not that short. Okay, no, I'm good. I'm okay. No, I'm good. To shape so we have a higher calling, if you will, to promoting high-quality CE programs that are shaping the preparation of youth to participate in an evolving and competitive world economy and to achieve their highest potential. So just, again, we've also added an additional charge as Patricia DeCoste also related that we now will provide advice and recommendations regarding the metrics for both the CTIG grant and also the Strong Workforce grant. So that is a continued role that we will play over this next year. And you'll see the original committee members, and we have had some turnover, as we've discussed. And then these were our meeting dates that we've had in the past. And also a little bit more on just the work that has gone over into this. We really did do a reconnaissance of what the CTE, quality CTE pathways, as well as several different organizations that have also participated and in the development of CTE pathways over the last 5 to 6 years in California. And from that, that is what we really use to glean and to develop these guiding principles. So you'll see these are some of the areas that we covered. Data was extremely important. This is something that we discussed quite deeply around collection data and the need to collect data across our organizations and across our systems. We talked about the Perkins 5, workforce investment opportunities, student support services, systems alignment, and essential elements of high-quality CDE programs. So what are our principles? We are focused on student-centered delivery of services. And by the way, you do have a copy of these principles. I believe it's in blue in your folders. So the focus of a student-centered delivery of services, promoting equity and access. Lots of discussion on equity and access. Achieve system alignment, support the continuous improvement and capacity building of systems, organizations, and people to do this work, and to ensure that state priorities and direction lead the state plan. And that was what Member Acosta had asked about. What does that really mean? Well, these principles will be the glue by which both the State Board of Education for K-12 and the community colleges can work together in this new Perkins plan. So absolutely, it is not just about what the State Board has done and setting a direction for K-12 education. It is definitely how we lead also into the work that the community colleges have done as well. And again, I can't emphasize enough how these principles will be that glue. Okay, so again, you'll see that we have the categories, student-centered delivery of services. We separated equity and access because both are so important. We didn't want to lump them in. We talked about leadership at all levels. You'll see that's part of our guiding principles. High quality integrated curriculum and instruction, skilled instruction and education leadership, informed by professional learning. So again, building capacity at all levels. We have, the principles cover career exploration, student supports, appropriate use of data, as I've discussed, the intentional recruitment and marketing, promotion, outreach, and communication. And that's how we get at the access and the equity issues. And sustained investments in funding through mutual agreements. This really calls for us to work in very different ways and changes in mindset. And I believe then the next presentation, Lisa Reimers will talk a little bit more about how we work together and kind of our operational guidelines, if you will. All right. Oh, here they are, actually, working norms. So we talk about frequent, open, intentional communication, mindset shifts, coordination of planning, and interdependent implementation of systems, leverage, build upon, and replicate effective models and practices. We all know that we're busy in our little worlds and we tend to just go down a path, and it's going to require us sometimes to slow down and look over our shoulders and look over to the left and to the right at our partners and seeing what they're doing so that we can work together. These building new culture for our institutions and incentivizing behavior and relationships and ongoing alliances through sustained funding and mutual agreements. Commitment to the work and create the stability and sustainability. So all those themes, if you will, that I'm going through right now are woven throughout our principles. And then for those of you in the public and those of you who may not know, here is the website. You can access our principles here. Any questions?
Thank you so much for providing that concise overview, and I will do what you suggest. I will look to the left and recognize that Patricia Rucker has joined us, and I'll look to the right and I'll see if there are any questions regarding the information that was just presented by Vice Chair Sun, and then I'll look ahead to see if Amy Costa has any comments. Yes, ma'am.
This is more of a comment. I've missed the last two meetings, and coming into this meeting, it looks different. It feels different. As you were reviewing the slides, it kind of took me back to our initial meetings, and I think I started a little slow because I have Sacramento fatigue. I've been here the whole week. So what I was reflecting on was how we really truly have been collaborative in developing these principles. So when I look at this yellow document, there was a lot of wordsmithing, there was a lot of translation because we are different systems and we're different bodies. You know, even though people see us as K-12, the Department of Education, the State Board, and then on your end, we have the Board of Governors and the Community College. We're all really different people coming together, even though we're part of the same team, right? And so there's a lot of discussions and a lot of translation that has to happen. And I know that, Patricia, you reference ESSA simply because that's the new, just went through that process, but I want to reassure those of you that are here from the community college that every single one of these principles, that everything was very much a collaborative discussion between both bodies. I also think that as we were working more in the abstract, it was a little easier. And I hopeful that as we move into 2019 and as we move into actually crafting this plan, that we continue to have that intent and that spirit, because we are now getting more into the real work. And it is easier to be collaborative in the abstract than it is in practice. But I think that that's the challenge we have for 2019, and I'm ready to take it on. Thank you.
Board Member Fawn?
Yeah, just I think an observation. I think these are wonderful guidelines and principles that I must give credit to those who are my predecessors and the counterparts at the CDE. But it was very nice knowing that this body dates back to the 1970s. That I did not know. My question or observation is that whatever we discuss here at this committee, how does it get then passed down or passed through the 72 districts or 114 colleges at the community, on the community college side? And then, I don't know how many districts there, 1,000 K-12 districts throughout the state. Since this is termed as a joint advisory committee, does that mean that what we discuss here, then on our side, the BOG, we go back to our entire board to brief and then pass policies, and then the same with our counterpart on the CDE side, or whatever we discuss here becomes guidelines or rules and regulations? That I'm still not too clear on. And I think it's questions or observations that I don't think we need to address today, but something that I'm kind of somewhat confused, if you will.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah. Should I? Please. Just some reflections on both Member Ortiz-Lacon's comments as well as you, Dr. Fahn's comments. So we needed, and I think it referred to glue, to pull us together, which is what these principles do. And as Member Felice Ortiz-Lacon mentioned, you know, we have these teams, and then how do these teams work together? Well, the idea behind the principles was to form Team California, right? So, and we need to have Team California approach as we enter to the Perkins application, right? Because Team California will be much stronger moving forward in that way. So in answer to your question, Member Fawn, it could be many things. It could be also regulations. It could be advisories, and it could be through the work that we do through these grants. There's all kinds of ways, and we saw that a little bit through the metrics discussion. It has to be an agreement between our organizations. So I think it's gonna shape as we go, but again, going back to these guiding principles will help us lay that foundation. And the real work, the hard work, actually does begin now. You know, it's like nice to have these words on paper, but the hard work is getting down and drilling down. And as far as how we then now relate down to the field, right, from here, where we are is that I think it starts with us as leaders and being cohesive, and then it starts with staff of all the different organizations, the community colleges, Board of Governors, CDE, SBE, staff working together and also being very aligned as they communicate out to the field. And then hopefully then as we get more leadership at the field level, then they will go down to school and classroom levels. So it's a process. It has to start from us, and I'm hoping that this will now have a ripple effect.
Member Rucker, do you have any comments that you'd like to add? I'm sure that you were part of the discussion that created this impressive document, with myself being very, very new. I just want to give huge accolades to the work that was done that created the glue in the first place. It gives us a starting point, especially for those of us that are new to the committee, to understand how far we've come to draft these.
First of all, thank you, and a welcome to everyone who's joining us today as part of this work going forward. I think it's also important and incumbent on us, and we won't forgive ourselves if we forget, to add the input that was provided by numerous stakeholder organizations, representatives from ROPs, and from community college districts across the state who came to our meetings at different times across the period of time that we've met in these meetings. Their input, their perspectives were invaluable. Their concerns were shared about what these principles mean for implementation on the ground, and gave us a different perspective from thinking about policy here in Sacramento inside the bubble to what the realities of doing the work are. Probably one of the most interesting conversations we had was the difference in the implementation timeline for the community colleges and the schools, where accountability in K-12 system was far more immediate and far more urgent than the community colleges. Not that the community colleges don't have a sense of responsibility for accountability, but their system works differently. Their metrics and needs for their timeline works differently. So figuring out a way to make all of those elements come together that not only complement the work that has to be done in both systems, but also is respective of the urgent needs and differences in those timelines probably was the most important learning for all of us.
And let's see if Member Costa has any comments or questions for Vice Chair Sun.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank my colleagues on the state board side for kind of explaining the process and the collaborative nature of this body. That is really good to hear. I do want to go back to my colleague, Board Member Fawn's comment, which is that I do think there's some real opportunities for us here. And I would note one of the key differences on our side of the house is that we have the student-based funding formula. So to Board Member Rucker's comment, I think our districts, it's not as mature as a conversation on the K-12 side, but we are beginning that work. And I think one of the very real ways we can push this out to our districts and our schools is actually through the student-centered funding formula. And specifically in the governor's budget, he mentioned, there's another task force that's been put together around the appropriate data sources for measuring student success. And I know that on the state board, they're going to be working on career readiness indicators. So my hope is that each of us will take these discussions that we have collaboratively and bring them back to our respective home boards to make sure that we're in alignment across the systems, and using the tools that each of us have to push it out to our districts and to make sure that we're meeting the guiding principles as have been laid out.
Any response?
No.
All right. Then I would like to ask, are there any other comments from members up here? If there are public comments, we will ask for those at the end of our meeting today. But I would like to thank you very much, Ting, and introduce Lisa Reimers, Education Programs Consultant from the California Department of Ed, who's going to give us a summary of the public feedback that was received on these guiding principles. Lisa?
Good morning, Chair Grande and members of the committee. I'm Lisa Reimers with the California Department of Education, and I work for Donna Wyatt and support career tech ed programs and adult education programs in the state. I'm here today to give you the feedback that we received from our principals. We originally opened a survey on August 24th, which closed on November 30th. We did a couple presentations. We had a public meeting over at the Health Sciences Building across the street on August 22nd. At the time, Chair Sun and Vice Chair Pamela Haynes made a joint presentation to the State Board of Education on September 7th. And I know there is conversation to get a presentation to the Board of Governors as well this year. All of our responses were obtained through the survey, and we ended up with 46 responses. So last time I gave you a little bit of feedback, we had 26. After that meeting, we got 20 more responses. Let's see, I'll go back. So a couple of things is we did not include responses that did not directly pertain to the guiding principles document. We did have many comments that were specifically addressed on the K-12 Strong Workforce Program or the the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant. We also got some information that will be helpful in the development of the new state Perkins plan. So we will incorporate those comments, even though they're not on our feedback for today. We will be incorporating those as when those workloads come about, so they won't be lost. So there was a couple common themes that showed up in every subsection of the survey. The survey was designed to just have comments based on the preamble, and then comments based on the guiding principles, and then the elements, the glossary, all of those things. So in each of those areas, here's a couple of the common themes. They want to see more inclusivity for elementary schools, middle schools, and adult education. They would also like to see more business and industry voice and to have more of a student-centered voice. I know the committee has talked about student-centered before, so that's one thing I know is important to y'all. There's also a lot of issues around competitive funding. A lot of comments that I saw were the winners versus the losers in the field, because all of our grants are on a competitive basis. And so that came up a lot, the winners versus the losers. There's also issues which you all know of because of all the metric conversations we've had. There's issues around the accurate and timely access of data. And I know that our new governor is also going to be taking up that conversation. So it's exciting times when it comes to data for us. Another thing is, how are locals going to implement these goals? It seems like the field is wanting some actual concrete objectives on how to meet each of the goals in our document. And then there's also, and this was a very heavy common theme, is the concern over the time and resources it takes for the collaboration for the agencies. It is a lot of money and it is a lot of time. Scheduling is hard. Those are very hard things to come about. So I think they just really want you to be aware of those obstacles as we move forward. And again, how are they going to be measured? How are they going to be implemented? They just want help and guidance. So I will go through all the sections of the guiding policy principles, starting with the preamble. I will say throughout the entire, all of the public feedback we got was very positive. They like the direction we're going, and they want us to keep moving forward. They like that it's well written and it's easy to understand. There was a specific comment about the preamble that they felt that the second paragraph was a little bit too vague, and would like to see, a little bit more clear. Moving on to the guiding policy principles. Again, they loved the bolding of the terms because it made it very clear what was being highlighted and what was important. There was a lot of commenters that asked about the California Way. they don't know what it is. And so I don't know if that is this committee's job or what it is to help communicate what the California way is. A few commenters asked about using a term pivot. I don't think they like the idea of it just pivoting. They're thinking it's more a directional change, a North Star change. And they would like to see flexibility for local implementation, taking into consideration really the urban and the rural differences. Our single school, school district as opposed to Los Angeles. And they would like to have well-defined accountability measures and expected outcomes so they know what they're shooting for. On the first paragraph, they would like to see employability skill set or industry. This is where they're coming up more with wanting that industry and business voice included. And they would also like to see that students of poverty are included and addressed in equity and access. Really getting down to eliminating those gaps. Moving on to essential elements. They felt the language was appropriate, and it's what we've been trying to work towards for a long time for CTE in California. A few commenters would like to see certifications, digital badging, more up-to-date terminology when it comes to certifications. There's a lot of forms and different methods of delivering those in today's world. One commenter wondered why in equity only 2 subgroups were identified, so I don't know if that's something you would like to look at. And a few commenters would mention that counselors really need training and support. For so long, counselors have been focusing on getting the kid to graduation and getting them to a 4-year university. The world of career technical education is vast, and counselors really need help to be educated on our 15 industry sectors and all of our pathways that we offer. Moving to working norms. Again, positive. They like that we have working norms to work together. This is the first time that's happened, and I think they're happy with that. A commenter mentioned that they live in an isolated area, and this goes back to the rural and the urban conversation. It's harder for them to find a qualified CTE teacher. It's harder for them to retain those teachers, and there's not as much availability to get those business and industry partnerships like it would be in San Francisco, LA, or even Fresno. So they would like to have us keep in mind those rural school districts out there and the unique obstacles that they have to overcome to create really high quality pathways. Another commenter would like to see the committee define their role in this work. What they want to know, what's the role of the committee, what's the role of the districts and the schools, and how all the puzzle pieces come together in the end. And then the last section, the glossary. They felt that it was informative. They would like to see more terms. So a commenter said we should stop saying the 21st century education because all these kids were born in the 21st century. I don't know how far we'll get since it's in our Perkins title. But, you know, I was thinking about it. I said, oh, yeah, my 11-year-old daughter, she was born this century, wasn't she? Another commenter suggested to include something about data systems, again, and easy access to that data, timely data, and a system alignment. Another commenter suggested that instead of saying all students, we should say each and every student, be a little bit more specific. And then on the next slide, we have a list of requests for us to define. Some of these are being worked on with the CCI, the College Career Indicator group, because some of these measures are going to be on there. So I know those definitions are being worked on. But here is a whole slew of definitions that they would like to see included in the document. So moving forward, again, these were all of the common themes that I posted on a slide earlier, the inclusivity and all of that stuff. I guess the question is to the committee right now is, Would the committee like staff to look at the document and include these main ideas that came popping up throughout the entire survey for you guys to look at, and possibly the definitions? And that is what I have for you today.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa. Please don't step away because I am sure there are going to be plenty of questions, and I hope you don't mind if I start with the first one. And that is how many individuals, when we look at the 46 that were included, how many other comments were omitted because they were not directly related? Any idea? Is it about the same number? Is it only a couple
No,
dozen?
we took, so there was 46 responses total. When I went through, I just consolidated them and then removed the ones that didn't apply. And then there was a lot that were duplicates, and so I consolidated them. I would say on an average, maybe 25% was probably more targeted towards a program or the Perkins plan. So I took those out, and we'll be sharing that with Donna and the team so they get incorporated with that work.
Thank you very much. All right. Yes, ma'am.
So one of the practices that I've seen with the frameworks on the K-12 side is when we do receive public comment, it will be a recommendation like reject, accept, no action, because it's a comment that's not relevant, right? And so though I do think that we need to consider some of these comments, you know, the one that says, why are only 2 student groups mentioned in the equity, which is English learners and students with disabilities. We do have for all students including but not limited to, right? So maybe just bolding the all would be a quick way to address that, because we are, part of the conversation was these are the students that are typically not served. And as we're looking at equity, we need to make sure that we're looking at all students, but in particular, those that have not been properly served, right? So we know what the dialogue was behind this, but obviously the public comment doesn't know. One other thing that came up early on was the California Way, which is something we use often in K-12. And I remember asking our community college colleagues, do you know what the California Way is? Do you use that terminology? I do think that that would be a comment, for instance, to accept and elaborate upon, but not only elaborate upon the way that we define it, but have consensus around how it's understood and defined by both systems. So I think it would be easy if you do go back into the document and think that it's worth including some, that we have a sense of what you did and why you accepted or rejected or no action was needed for that. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. It's a great way to start us off, Ms. Ortiz-Lincoln. Dr. Fan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Lisa, since you asked for us to comment on the moving forward, and you have a number of bullet items there, I think if I were to make a suggestion, I probably would center around, because I guess I'm a practical guy. I look at how things get done at the local level. So I think your bullet number, I put a star in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How do locals implement these goals? And what guiding principles are comprehensive, but how will they be implemented? What will that look like, and how it will be measured? I think for the two systems, the K-12 and the community colleges, to kind of look at or put our arms around how these things get done would be, I guess, my emphasis. And perhaps including, are we doing this only in Sacramento here at the Chancellor's office and the CDE, or are we actually taking this conversation to the school districts and college districts? And I see Matthew from our side has gone to a number of sites and regions to discuss, and I think that needs to be continued even at the K-12 districts. So those are my 2 cents, I guess.
Thank you.
Just so completely agree with Member Ortiz-Lincoln. That process that we've used at CDE seems very logical, so that we can make sure that that the stakeholders who did take the time to provide feedback know that we did receive that feedback, and they have some indication of why it was accepted or not accepted, or there was no action taken. And that staff take a look at that and come back with some of the wordsmithy type of suggestions in there, like taking out 21st century, that's okay. I mean, I agree with the logic. So those kinds of things, I think that's fine. One of the things that I've found, I would like to for us to just get these firmed up as we move forward. So maybe at the next meeting to come back with those suggestions and we adopt it and move forward with that. The other piece. Sorry, it's been 3 days of meeting, and kind of my thoughts are like shorting out at this point in time. So I think the other is making our principles more front and center. And I know these came up very, very quickly, and especially with the Strong Workforce Grant application and with our own CTIG applications, that as, again, we move forward, that those applications can be tweaked in such a way that it aligns with these more clearly, and that our people in the field can see, oh, this grant, this money that you receive is for achieving these particular policy principles. And so that's what I would encourage us to continue doing.
Let's see if Amy Costa has any comments or questions for Lisa. Amy?
This is Deborah Jones. Amy has left the room.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. The question that I would ask is, as we're looking at the guiding principles document that over the last 18 months has been developed, is there anything, Lisa, from the public comments that you would look at right now and say that fundamentally changes what is in the document? From what was presented, it seems as though they may be clarifications, additional specificity, but my overall sense from your presentation was it doesn't change the foundation. Would you agree?
I would agree. I think the field, like I said before, we got a lot of really positive comments. I think they're happy that we have something that kind of defines the North Star and where we're going to go. I think it calms them a little to know that we're talking about these things. I do think that they would like to see some of those main threads that kept, like the inclusion of adult education, the inclusion, since Perkins now can be funded down to middle school, those type of items, I think they would really like to see those included. Because I think they may take the document and say, oh, if it's in here, then we're districts, they tend to take documents like this and say, oh, it's in here, then we're okay to move forward. So I think that's where it comes from.
One last question. When the survey respondents were entering their information, did we collect demographics of any sort as to their representation of the K-12 or the community college side or outside interested individuals? Do we know what those 46 people represent?
Yes, we do on a very upper level, and I can get you that information if you would like it.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Any further questions for Lisa?
I just want to, Board Member Vaughn mentioned just keeping the perspective of the practitioner and the local level. And we also, I think you missed the part, the 1 year when we had so many folks coming to tell us about their programs and their pathways from both systems. And one of the things that we had a lot of discussions about is how does this really translate down to practice to the school level? I offer that. I run youth programs, and one of our focus is workforce development, right? And so even when we say internships, what's not included in that is the liability, is transportation, it's making sure that students are prepared, that we teach them a curriculum about office etiquette and time management and all the soft skills that will matter, right? Which is why I think the middle school piece, maybe we can get our students out in internships, but there is curricula that will start getting them ready with those soft skills, right? I have 2 young children. Time management, a lot of that resilience and other things that many of us know and enjoy and can appreciate, a little diluted included, you know, and so I'm constantly reminding myself how that is taught is not always innate. And so we work with students across the country doing that. And so we had those discussions. I just want to reassure you, but I think we need to continue having them because yes, once this goes down back into the local level, a lot of that we need to continue reminding ourselves that this will be implemented and it has to be implementable. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for the comments and the feedback we were able to give you, Lisa. Did we answer your question as to where to go next with this?
I believe so, yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much once again. I think Donna Wyatt is back up again, Director of the Career and College Transition Division at the California Department of Education, and she is going to update the Advisory Committee on the metrics for the two state initiatives, the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant, CTIG, and the K-12 Strong Workforce. Donna, welcome.
Good morning again, committee. Today we're going to be giving you a update on the two state initiatives for K through 12 CTE, the CTE Incentive Grant and the K through 12 Strong Workforce, to basically go through kind of a background and a history of how we got here. The September 19th meeting of 2018, initially staff from CDE and the community college presented an overview of the two initiatives. Then on November 26th, we did an in-depth review of the metrics. We also took recommendations from the committee on the revisions to those metrics and provided and put together recommendations that then went to the Department of Finance. On the 14th, those final recommendations were presented to the committee and the approval of those recommendations. And then from there, we did submit those to the Department of Finance for consideration. A summary of the metrics for CTIG, we indicated, or the committee indicated, that they wanted to replace all of the references to Perkins 4, which was called the Carl D. Perkins Career Technical Education Improvement Act of 2006. We need to find shorter names for Perkins. Also known as Perkins 4, to the new current Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century, Perkins 5. The second modification or recommendation was to revise the metric that read high school cohort graduation rate to read high school graduation rate. And the reason for that change was to be more inclusive of our data, taking into account our guiding policy principles of equity and access. After that, there were no additional revisions to the actual metrics, but what we did do is we operationalized some of those metrics, particularly the college and career readiness and attainment of industry certification. On the K through 12 strong workforce side, again, replacing the old name of Perkins 4 with the new name for Perkins 5, we also decided, or the recommendation was, to align the metrics on high school graduation. The previous legislation read the number of pupils completing high school. So again, the recommendation was to make that high school graduation rate so that it aligned with CTIG. And again, no other changes to those metrics, but several metrics were operationalized so that we could better collect data on student achievement in career technical education. On December 19th, CDE and community college staff met with staff from Department of Finance and also various legislative staff to go over some of those recommended changes. In addition to the revisions or the recommendations that were made, we also asked for CTIG to include encourage, maintain, and also add the word strengthen, so that the clear message was to improve career technical education through CTIG. Also, language was clarified around the regional occupational centers and programs. The CTE facilities grants were excluded from match in both initiatives, both the CTIG and K through 12 strong workforce, and again, the change of the names in Perkins. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague from the CDE, Michelle McIntosh, who is our administrator in the CTE Leadership Office, to talk to you about CTIG.
I'm a little shorter.
Good morning, Chair Grande and members of the committee. Michelle McIntosh, Administrator of the Career Technical Education Leadership Office under Donna Wyatt and the Career College Transition Division. My office is responsible for administering the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant, also known as CTIG. So what I want to share with you is we were very excited to get the application out for fiscal year 18-19. That application did go out to the field December 19th, and that December 19th of 2018. We did have a very quick turnaround period, and so those applications will be due back to us here at the CDE on January 25th. The reason for the tight timeline is so that we could get the money out to the field as quickly as possible. You will find the information about the RFA on the CDE website. And really the purpose of CTIG moving forward now is to encourage and maintain the delivery of high quality career technical education programs. Again, Donna mentioned that new wording will be added to include strengthen. But the focus really in speaking with the legislature and the Department of Finance is really moving forward now that the past 3 years of CTIG were there to help during the implementation of the local control funding formula. Now that we're out of the local control funding formula, or not that we're out of, but that it has been fully implemented, now the focus needs to be really on encouraging and maintaining the programs that we have. So for the fiscal year 2018-19, we were appropriated $150 million of ongoing funding. This was great news because this is $150 million that we will have each year. So we're happy about the ongoing. 4% is designated, 4% of those dollars, or $6 million of those dollars is designated for applicants that have ADA, average daily attendance of 140 or less. Then we have the middle pot, which is 8%. That represents about $12 million for districts that have ADA of 141 to 550. And then 88% or $132 million is designated for applicants with ADA of 551 or more. For the CTIG applications moving forward, folks are going to be responsible for demonstrating a match. The match now has gone to 2 to 1. So for every dollar that the state gives, the locals are now required to match $2. Okay. Also, they have a 3-year funding plan that is required to show not only they'll have one funding plan that shows their funds for the first year, and then an additional 3-year funding plan that shows how they prepare or how they're actually going to sustain the programs that they currently have. And an interesting piece of the legislation itself is not only how they're going to currently fund those programs and fund those programs in the future, but that they're going to maintain that same level of program funding for those programs. They also need to meet all the minimum eligibility standards. So there were 10 standards that are similar to our high quality elements of a high quality CTE program. And with that, we took those 10 elements, we developed them into a rubric. We also aligned those elements to the essential elements that you guys have that the committee has put together as well. And so to give you an example of that, what that might look like, I know Member Fawn had asked, you know, what does this look like and how does it get down to the field? So in our rubric, for example, one of the criteria that the districts are asked to respond to is, do they offer a high quality CTE curriculum and instruction that are aligned to the CTE model curriculum standards? Well, that follows along with the committee's essential element of a high quality integrated curriculum and instruction. To give you another example would be provides opportunities for pupils who are individuals with exceptional needs to participate in all programs. This follows both of the essential elements of equity and access. Okay. So data that's going to be required to be reported, as Donna had mentioned, we've worked both with the DOF and the legislature. to look at how that data might change. But right now, what we're looking at is the same data that we've collected before, with the change to the high school graduation rate rather than the cohort. Also, number of pupils completing CTE coursework. We believe these are things that we can get out of, this data can be reported out of CalPADS. The number of pupils meeting academic career readiness standards as defined by the CCI, associated with the California School Dashboard. We believe we can get that from our CCI office. The number of pupils obtaining an industry-recognized credential, certificate, license, or other measure of technical skill attainment. The number of former pupils employed, the types of businesses in which they are employed, and the number of former pupils enrolled in any of the following, which is a post-secondary educational institution, a state apprenticeship program, a form of job training other than a state apprenticeship program. And since all of these are follow-up data, we're looking at developing a survey for the districts to be able to report this data to us. And that concludes my presentation of CTIG overall as we are right now.
Before you step away, I want to see if there's any questions from the information that you presented. Member Rucker?
I do have a question about the maintenance of effort requirement. I tried to read through, I made the mistake of trying to read through the grant information itself, and I have to admit I was a little confused about the fiscal accountability elements, particularly the maintenance of effort requirement. When I hear the term of art, maintenance of effort, I think about the requirements that I'm most familiar with under ESSA and previously under No Child Left Behind and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So when you say that there's a requirement for them to maintain the funding level, okay, that's a difference from maintaining the expenditure requirement. Can you tell me, are they required for year to year for the 3 years of the grant to budget the same funding amount, or for the 3 years of the grant, are they required to spend the same level of program funds with some particular exceptions?
Okay, so I'm going to go to the actual legislative piece.
Yeah.
Because I know that was a question and concern. We did a webinar yesterday for that in particular, for the grant. And let me get to that there.
And in asking the question, I don't mean at all to put you on the spot. I'm trying to make sure I understand it.
Sure. And I know because I said this several times. It's funny because I said this several times in the webinar yesterday. The 3-year plan for continued financial and administrative support. So the legislation, the language says for continued financial and administrative support of CTE programs that demonstrates a financial commitment of no less than the amount expended on those programs. So it's the amount that they're expending, they're required to keep.
Okay, so are there some exceptions, like if there's a financial uncertainty or a sudden shortfall, are there exceptions provided for?
Nothing that was called out specifically in the legislation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much.
Yes.
Vice Chair Sun?
You know, I probably missed it somewhere that the timeline does seem really short
Yes.
for the application, and I totally get that we're trying to get this out to the field so they can get their funding for in 2019 fiscal year. And it seems that those who have applied already will be positioned better in a better spot to be able to get continued funding. But is there an is there a way for new schools, LEAs, to apply for this fund? And how does that maintenance of effort and all that work
Right.
Sure.
So I think first to help clarify, this is a completely different grant application process. So the grants prior, they were asked basically check yes or no to these 10 elements. And then how are you going to how are you going to address those 10 elements? Now we have an actual rubric that rates from a 0 to a 3. And the ratings are, there's 15 questions that they're asked to rate from those 10 elements. And they're going to rate themselves as either not in practice, which would give them 0 points. It's an emerging practice, which is 1 point. Quality practice at 2 points, and exemplary practice at 3 points. And really the way we design the rubric is that we really expect everybody, at some point, they're going to be a quality practice. We know that they're not going to all be exemplary. We know, I mean, if they're exemplary, I want to go see that program. And also, again, thinking about the fact that this is about continuous improvement for these programs. So for new programs, we would expect if they're doing career tech ed, they would at least be able to hit some of these areas, whether it's a 1 or a 2. But if they're brand new and they don't have anything in place, then it would be difficult for them to answer these questions, or it would be difficult for them to apply.
Okay. So I would just, in the next round, next year's round, I would imagine that we would start this process much earlier than December.
That is our hope. But I will say, given the legislation and the breakdown and the time that we have to get the application out, have the field return it to us, be able to get the State Board of Education to approve the allocations, which we're trying to hit March of every single year, to be able to give folks their allocations so they know approximately what they're going to have. And then there's the date for this committee to be able to make recommendations. So getting enough time to be able to get data for you to look at to make recommendations on what those metrics should look like in the future. That's why we have such a tight timeline.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that with the field are the ones that get short-thrifted as a result of this. And we also had talked also with Strong Workforce Grant, timing it so that the dashboard data comes out and the LEAs have this ability to look at their data and be able to think more thoroughly through their planning and then access funds, all that. So I think this is an infrastructure issue. We really need to take a look at. We've got all these different entities with their timelines, but I think in the end, it's the field that.
Absolutely, I would agree with you. So, yeah, we can definitely take a look at if there's any way it could be moving dates as to when things are approved or something like that. But
And this is an ongoing appropriation now, right?
it is an ongoing.
So
yes.
it's unless it gets cut out, we can assume that it is going to continue.
Right. For next year, we would expect to get the grant out. Our timeline, knowing everything that has to happen, our timeline would be to get the application out to the field by the beginning of December, and then possibly being able to give them a little bit more time, because now they will be applying again. So really, for them, it's going to be looking at what they did. Did they say they did? Did they do what they said they were going to do? And then what's the new plan for the following year?
Yeah. Ideally, it should be November,
I
just
know,
because of all the holidays and everything else. So
I get it.
Do we give the field an opportunity to provide us with feedback regarding these timelines?
We do. In fact, I'm working with our career technical education, our incentive, the incentive grant technical assistance centers next week. And one of the questions we'll be looking at is, we'll be looking at the rubric to get feedback on the rubric, how we can maybe revise that for next time. Also looking at the timeline to see what we can do to possibly move things up.
Any other comments from this side before I come back over here? Member Ortiz-Ligon.
I do. I have a question regarding the data reported. So I see number 3, number of pupils meeting academic and career readiness standards as defined by the CCI indicator. So I know that that indicator is not based on individual students. And so how are we gauging that? Because it could be that the students who are part of benefiting from our funding are doing better than the rest of the school based on the CCI, and we won't be able to tease that out. Or it could be that we're really looking at the performance of other students that are not benefiting from the funding, and it could inflate the performance for this particular criteria point. So can you give me a little bit of the rationale behind using this and how we would tease out our actual impact based on our investment?
Yeah, that's actually more work that we'll have to do with our CCI office to be able to see how. Oh, is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll actually need to work with our CCI office to find out how we can tease that out. If not, if that's even the correct measure that we should be looking at. And that is because there is actual legislation, again, that this committee makes recommendations on those measures. What that looks like.
It seems like there is a burning comment on this item. I just wanted to make sure, is your comment on this item as well?
Yes.
Oh, very well. Then I'm going to oh, are you sure? Okay.
It actually was just related to that, because it is metric that was in legislation, but we made a recommendation that not be used, right? Or remind me what on the metric part of this.
The recommendation was that we use the metric as it's written in the legislation, but that we, on our end, operationalize it.
Oh, I
to look
see.
at specific things within the CCI as UCA through G.
Thank you. Okay.
Those type of things. So we operationalize the metric.
Okay, that's.
Member Rucker?
Well, thank you, Donna, because that's what I was going to explain was what our rationale was. So no, Donna actually, oh, no. No, thank you, Donna, for doing that. I also want to add, given what these metrics are and what it means on the ground to operationalize this data, there is a tension concerning the timeline that still needs to be understood, because the data that's required as the quality indicators do not become available to the LEAs that would do this application until December. So unless the Department of Education plans on releasing that data at the end of November rather than in December, this still creates a disadvantage for LEAs that would be new to the application process, because they still do not have the information to even start up the process of engaging with this application with their stakeholders. So again, while I think that it's important to look at how to massage the timeline and the deadlines for the application, because you all have work to do on your end, I think that we need to pay attention to what the reality is for what they are tasked to do in order to develop a grant that is competitive. And so I heard you clearly say that you want to be able to put the grant out next year, because this is a continuing appropriation the first week in December. When was the dashboard actually posted this year? Yeah, so the dashboard was posted this year, December 3rd. So districts will see this application, get their dashboard. They have to start pouring through their data to figure out if they even have a way of framing a competitive application based on that dashboard. But they also have to have meetings with their stakeholders in December. And so I think we have to think about what the work is and the load that we are putting on districts to do this with the timeline. So I'm glad you're going to put it out earlier, but you need to think about what the deadline needs to be on the other side, because we cannot give lip service to stakeholder engagement simply to chase the paper of submitting the application, and then for those who will be reapplying again to begin treating the application process more as a compliance activity than a real conversation on continuous improvement.
It's a very important point. Were there any other questions for Michelle? Thank you very much, Michelle.
Good morning, Member Grande, Chair Grande, members of the Advisory Committee. Thanks for having us here this morning. I'm Matt Roberts with the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. I'm the Dean of Field Operations. I wanted to provide you an update on the K-12 Strong Workforce Program, but specifically some of the engagement meetings. I was specifically asked to present that data for you. So, question? Okay.
That's really small print. So.
Yes, sorry.
Forgive me, that look of wonder on my face is what you saw. I apologize.
I'm trying to read it. All right, good. Well, we'll see if we can blow it up. So we did a series of regional engagement meetings, and by regions, I mean there's 7 regions in the state that under Doing What Matters and Strong Workforce program are in effect. They align with lots of different folks in the field, the QIBs, the Workforce Investment Boards. We're looking to align with them, but also with the CTIG TAPs and some of the work that's going on there. So with these engagement meetings, we went out to the field, had some folks behind us that were taking down questions, and all of those led to an FAQ document that we currently have online. So the engagement meetings were very, very valuable. We had we did them from October 31st until roughly December 13th. And really the objectives for these meetings were to develop a shared understanding of the K-12 Strong Workforce Program. It was really important for us to make sure that all LEAs had access to the funds. And that's really the primary impetus of going out and meeting with folks. The other thing too is you get a really good sense of what the field is looking for, what's practical, what's not, especially in terms of timelines and what would work and what won't work. And we were able to pivot a lot in terms of how we actually rolled this RFA out, given this comment. So in terms of completion of the first objective, we really feel like we had some very good engagement and that the word is spreading. We also wanted to develop a shared understanding of the priorities that drive the K-12 Strong Workforce Program funding. And part of these really align with priorities that are within a regional economic ecosystem, if you will. So in other words, where are the jobs at? Where are the needs for students to sort of move on to? How do we create more of a sequence of courses or a pathway that will lead students into college and career? So the same things apply there. There's a direct call out in the legislation to have the priorities emerge sort of within the regions. And those are really sector scans. They're sector-based scans. They're looking at what are the hot, commodities, what are the hot jobs that are coming out, what is industry and business telling us? And so that particular piece is very important in terms of really driving those priorities. So we're looking forward to more engagement with our K-12 partners within the regions, and each of the regional consortia are still working with their K-12 partners. We have quarterly meetings that we do, and so we'll be making sure that we include the K-12 voice. It all leads up to a revision of a 4-year plan that's called out for under Strong Workforce every 4 years, and we're in year 3, coming into year 3 for that plan. That plan, we were asked by Department of Finance and the legislature to add a section for K-12 engagement, and so we'll do that this year based on the results that we have. The third bullet is really important for us because if we're to lead the cross systems and to really make these data definitions align, we really need to develop that collaborative spirit and to move it forward. And I'm so glad that we talked again about the guiding principles this morning, because the RFA for the K-12 Strong Workforce Program came out 2-3 days ago. And in the first page, it does call out the guiding principles in terms of alignment to them. So I want you to know that we have called these out because it's extremely important, and we get the vision where it needs to go. I was on the phone with one of our regional chairs yesterday from the Bay Area, and I said, how are you guys using the principles? And he said, we're all over it. We have already put them out to our K-12 partners, and because they're so aligned with pathway development, with elements of 11 high-quality CTE programs, it's a very good segue for our community college folks to actually begin to collaborate with their K-12 partners. So I wanted to share that really excitedly with you. I was sitting back here going, I need to share this, but I know it's more formal. So I think that there is a real desire to use good educational process. And I really want to commend the advisory group for really making sure that those principles are rooted. And not only that, it tells us how we're supposed to work together. And so we use that. We use that when we go out to the regions and we say, this is how we want engagement to look. We want it to be centered around these. So realize that the principles are front and center. They're at the top of everything we're doing, and it's in the RFA as well, so which I'm happy about that. Also, to develop a letter of intent. We do this letter of intent process really to get an idea of what's on people's minds. What are you guys thinking? What types of projects? What types of programs? What types of pathways of study are you thinking? And it really allows us in the regions to engage with those individual partners and to say, where can we make better connections? If there's one thing that we see emerging with this, with both sides of the house, with CTIG and K-12 strong workforce, and the emphasis on strong workforce, it's really breaking down those barriers. It's really making sure that we're engaging with industry in a very purposeful way. It's really making sure that we know that the investments can sort of align with each other. And then the last thing we really wanted to do is make sure that folks had opportunities for next steps in the field. So we're really very pleased. Sorry about the small print on this one. Going on to the next page. Maybe it's better on the, well, maybe it's not better on the screen. Maybe it's better right there. So you can see we started in the Bay Area on October 31st. We did 2 to 3 per region, and you can see the amount of attendees. I mean, really good turnout. 75% of the turnout were LEA partners, which we definitely made sure, we got to have them in the room. We got to have folks in the room. So is it representative of everybody? No. But we're very pleased that the word is getting out and we're achieving in this first year the access. And you can see the total number of contacts that we had over this 2-month whirlwind of meetings. Also want to thank our folks, our colleagues here at CDE for their assistance. They were out on the road with us. They were making sure that we were engaging and that the field saw us working together. So how that operationalizes, I think, is very important. So. Last one, I wanted to make sure that you saw the timeline for implementation. You can see the latest date is in the middle there of January 7th when the online application came through. We have an RFA that goes out through paper, but the application is done through electronic format, and it's done through a product that we call NOVA. And NOVA is an online application process. What it will allow us to do is to take the applications and the data that's coming in, and we'll be able to show where those expenditures are going in year 1. So when we get to the legislature in April and May, we'll be able to put up an analytic, that will sort of publicly share where the investment is going. And the reason for that is we want to be extremely transparent for our business and industry partners, in the room especially, of where our public dollars are going. So this is all good. So we're happy the RFA came out. The timeline does follow CTIG timeline. The wisdom of having it aligned with an LCAP process was absolutely there. The field loves the fact that it's in the LCAP. They love that accountability piece. So I think what I'm trying to tell you is a lot of the things that 99.9% of the things, 101% of what you guys have said is really happening in the field. So we just want to make sure that you know that. I'd like to, at a future meeting, come back and maybe do a demonstration of our NOVA system so that you're able to kind of see what an application process looks like. One of the things that's always open to intersegmentally is to work with across the table and such, and to see if we can align some of these efforts. The other thing that NOVA will allow us to do is it's a reporting system, so quarterly reports will go in, and we're able to drill down more on some of the process metrics that you were asking for. So, because coming up with metrics and then actually making them to where you can evaluate them, or make them usable, make them part of the system takes a little bit of a lift. We think that the NOVA system will help some of those back-end questions, some of those process questions that you guys are coming up with. We want to be able to measure in such a way that's going to deliver the results that you're after, and we think that NOVA in addition to the CCNI, in addition to launch board, sorry, I almost forgot the name, will sort of get us there. Anyway, I've said a lot. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Before you step away,
Yeah.
I noticed on the slide regarding the regional engagement meetings, there are two columns, one for number of responses to engagement survey, and then the second one, % of responses to engagement survey. What types of questions were included in that engagement survey?
Absolutely. We actually had our colleagues from Wested in the room, and what they were doing is they were chronicling questions that were coming up verbally, and we used this evaluation tool at every single one to allow for folks to ask questions, number one, but also to say, was it useful? What types of things are you after in the future? What would help with collaboration? What are some of the barriers that you see happening? So it was a very short evaluation. It's more so to get people's questions. Because honestly, by the time we get to the RFA process, we have a body of FAQs already developed on the website that should help to answer questions. So it's more so like, what kind of questions do you guys have, right?
So was there a common theme to the questions? And are you going to refer me to the FAQ document because all of them were themed out and the responses were drafted on that FAQ document?
I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to, I can absolutely do that, but I can also send the Joint Advisory Committee a synopsis of what we learned, some of the questions that were asked. We just had a draft that came out yesterday of detailing all of them. So let me finish that up. Can I send that to you?
I would love that. Other members would like to read it as well. Thank you for the offer.
Absolutely. Yep.
And Member Fawn.
Matt, thank you for the presentation, and I do applaud you and your team for reaching out to the various stakeholders and LEAs and the like throughout the state. So that I am clear, this is the $164 million that we discussed at 3 meetings ago. And the Chancellor's Office serves as the fiscal agent?
Yeah, we're the fiscal agent. Yes, so the apportionment goes through us.
So then the applicants, must they be LEAs or can they be community college districts?
Yeah, the funding is very clear on this. They have to be LEAs, but there's an implicit part of this language that says that really sort of draws out a collaborative relationship between a community college and the LEA partners.
So while the LEA must be at the fiscal agent at the local level,
right?
By the way, what is the maximum grant amount that could be applied?
Absolutely. When we put out the grant amounts, there were 3 tiers to them. I don't have those in front of me, but I can get those to you, unless I can ask one of my colleagues behind me who knows those answers. Yeah, it's large, medium, and small.
Okay.
But, and it's by ADA size, so it's called out for. So it's very similar to what CTIG wrote.
Okay.
Anyway,
So then, while the LEA serves as the fiscal agent, can the grant money be spent by the college partners?
What we're looking for is it needs to, the LEA partner is the lead fiscal agent on it. They can have partners down below them, and dollars can certainly benefit the creation of those programs. What we're looking for is more play with strong workforce money at the college level. We're looking for more leverage points between those dollars to sort of come forward. The other thing too is with adult education, we're looking for that type of leverage point. So it's almost as if we're looking for dollars to be brought in to the equation to say what is the pipeline going from 7 through 12 on up past. So these dollars are really designed to help 7 through 12, but to build the pipeline from secondary to post-secondary.
And so you don't require matching funds on?
We do require matching funds. Yeah, there's a call out for matching funds. It's 2-to-1 for most LEAs. For ROPs that don't necessarily have a large cash flow, it's a 1-to-1 match.
Okay.
And those matches we've specified in the RFA and the application that it can be in kind up to 50%. Because a lot of folks, a lot of districts have invested money in CTE facility. And so if you have an open DSA, I guess before you close it out, the DSA process, the Department of State Architect, you can use some of those funds as matching as well. You can use salaries as matching. So we wanted to make it really flexible for it. You just can't use admin salaries. That's the one sticky point. Yes, including Benny's. Because I think that the investment's the investment. And so we don't see a restriction on that. So we, unless somebody tells us there's a restriction, we want to open it up for folks.
Matt, I'd be curious in maybe 2 or 3 meetings from this meeting, that if you could keep us informed as to the types of partnerships and the types of programs developed through this funding, so that we can be informed and learn.
Honestly, I'm glad you said that, because if there's one theme that's emerging through all of this, it's the duplication of effort. It's the reduction in that duplication. How do we work together to reduce duplication? And when we look at strategic plan goals that drive this, we see that as one of the main ones. And I think that when we're out on the road, we try to sort of say that in your project development, in your pathway development, how do you reduce the duplication? Because we spend a lot of money on stuff that doesn't go anywhere.
Thank you.
Not by money.
Thank you, Member Fawn. Any further comments from anyone else? Then I would like to thank you, Matthew, Lisa, Donna, Patricia, Ting, Michelle, for the incredible amount of information you have given us this morning to digest. And we can now break for lunch and reconvene this meeting at 12:30. For the members of our public that is participating, I'd like to remind you that we will have public commentary period at the end of our meeting today. So please don't go away. Come back and join us. We'll reconvene at 12:30. We stand in recess. If I had a gavel, I would knock it against its base twice to reconvene our meeting. It is now 12:30, so I'd like to call everyone back into order, and we are back in session. And I don't need to provide a formal invite to Donna Wyatt to return to the podium because she is already there. So I will then invite her to please lead our discussion on the state's transition plan for Perkins 5. Welcome back, Donna.
Thank you, Joint plan, so we will be presenting to you together today. So this is the California Workforce Joint Advisory Committee, and this we're going to be talking about the new Perkins 5, again, strengthening career and technical education for the 21st century. Specifically today, we're going to be addressing the 2019-2020 transition plan. This is the plan that will essentially buy us a year to do all of the stakeholder feedback and the full development of the plan. So what I'm going to be talking about, or what we're going to be talking about today, are the requirements under this transition plan, particularly 2 areas that the feds are calling on narratives, one on programs and programs of study, and then the other on addressing the needs of special populations. So those are the 2 sections today that we will be covering in our presentation. We will be using the guiding policy principles to explore and discuss the elements of the transition plan to Perkins 5 in order to ensure, again, that the state vision and the initiatives for career technical education are prioritized and highlighted. And I know throughout the previous presentations, we've been talking about the guiding policy principles being as the glue to this work. And I would like to take that up a step and say, no, it's not the glue, it's the gorilla glue that holds these together. You're going to see, I hope, in this presentation that much of the work that we are doing, it's already ongoing. What's called for in Perkins is already taking place. The outreach to middle school, to create middle school CTE, the focus on apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships, addressing the needs of special populations. So I'm hoping through this presentation you will see the alignment of all the state initiatives, and we'll actually be calling them out as we go through the presentation as well. A very, very brief history of how we got here to Perkins 5. 2008-2012 was the last state plan. That was actually approved by the State Board of Education on March 12, 2008. It was effective from 2008 through 2012, with the most recent update from the Department of Ed being funded and operational through fall. I'm sorry, let me step back a minute. Perkins 4 has been renewed repeatedly since 2012. On July 31st, 2018, Congress passed the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act. We've been getting questions from the field of what is happening with this guide that we're going to be talking about today. So I wanted to start by letting the committee know what is happening at the federal level given the closure. Currently, the Department of Ed is fully funded through the fall of 2019. So they are fully operational. We are corresponding with them back and forth around Perkins and also the consolidated annual report for Perkins. However, there are two agencies that have to do or are the agencies who will approve the final guidance and post the final guidance, and they are not operational. So in communications with our federal attorneys, Brustein and Manasevich, the recommendation that we are getting from them is that we should use the current draft guide and move forward with it, that we should be very concise, very concrete, but also minimal as we do this transition plan, not really knowing what's going to happen at the federal level given the closure. So that's the best we have at this point in time with regards to the final guidance on the transition plan. Some key changes to Perkins 5. Perkins 5 expands the definitions of special populations. It also expands the definition of CTE stakeholders and eligible institutions. For the first time, it defines what a CTE concentrator is, and it also increases the reserve from 10 to 15%, and it includes innovative practices as part of the focus for those reserve funds. And again, we'll be talking about that through the rest of the presentation as well, and those are just a few changes to Perkins. The guide for the submission of state plans was released by OCTAE on October 24th. The public comment period ended on November 24th, and final guidance is expected, or I guess hoped, to be released by mid-January. Comments were submitted by the two national organizations for Career Tech Ed, the Association of Career and Technical Education, and Advanced CTE. You have copies of that joint letter in your packets. Also, an additional response was submitted by the Council of Chief State School Officers, and again, you have that response in your packets. And then I submitted a brief response as well, basically endorsing what Advanced CTE had said and the Association of CTE, but also really expressing some concerns around the three narratives required and the fact that we have not had time to get anything out to stakeholders for their feedback. So we did collectively put responses to OCTAE on our concerns with the transition plan. As I said, the transition plan requires three narratives: programs and programs of study, meeting the needs of special populations, and then a third narrative that we're not going to cover today but will later, fiscal responsibility. Under programs and programs of study, they are asking us for a description of how we're going to develop the state-level CTE programs and programs of study. Those state-level programs could be used on the local level for the development of local programs of study. We also are being asked to describe the process for how we're going to approve locally developed programs and programs of study and pathways. And it's interesting to note that in Perkins 5, for pathways, they use the definition from WIOA. On programs of study, they actually define programs of study. And it's essentially what was in Perkins 4. The difference with program of study is that there is more of an alignment to industry credentials, and particularly the focus on open entry and open exit. Other than that, the programs of study are pretty much aligned to Perkins 4, just those few changes. On the local level, we will be asking for our districts to tell us about the collaboration that leads to work-based learning experiences, how to improve or how they are working to improve the outcomes and reduce performance gaps for their special populations, how they're ensuring students have opportunities for early college credit, whether that be dual enrollment, articulation, or early college high school, and how stakeholders are going to be involved in the planning, development, implementation, and evaluation of their CTE programs. In looking at our guiding policy principles, there are several areas, and I've actually just highlighted a few of the areas where there is blending of the requirements of Perkins to the guiding policy principles. Under student-centered delivery of services, specifically the multiple entry and exit points that's called for in Perkins is called out in our guiding policy principles. And then the continuum of education from middle school to high school and on to community college. The guiding policy principle of equity and access, the elimination of barriers, and the approval of outcomes for our special populations. And then again, ensuring those opportunities for early college credit. Under system alignment, the coordination of state, regional, and local workforce development, ensuring stakeholder feedback, and then supporting collaboration that facilitates that those work-based learning experiences for students. Under continuous improvement and capacity building, continuous improvement is the core of CTIG, but again, in both technical skill attainment and academic achievement. And then some of the state priorities, local control funding, the incentive grant, strong workforce, guided pathways, our collaboration and partnership with the California Workforce Development Board, the Workforce Association, and then, as I mentioned, the work that's currently going on now with these state initiatives, but also the expansion down into middle school, pre-apprenticeships, and apprenticeships.
And I would say on the community college side, it aligns very well with the guided pathways framework that's currently in play within the system, and talking about multiple on-ramps and off-ramps for students to take to get to both college and career or beyond. So we're seeing really good alignment with some of the language that's coming out. So.
What I did with this, and normally the norm is we go through the presentation and then we ask for questions, but what I've done with this presentation is ask some essential questions that staff needs guidance on and recommendations, or questions that you want us to come back, or answers that you want us to come back with around some of the things that we need to look at with programs of study and serving our special populations. So what my hope is as we go through these essential questions, we can have the discussion question by question so that we can take notes and know what to come back to you with in February. The first question that I want to pose is, how can the state agencies design these programs of study for open exit and open entry? And I should note that Perkins also asks for open entry, open exit while students continue to earn credentials throughout that process. So some of the things that we're currently doing, the dual enrollment, articulation, credit transfer agreements. I think another area that we need to look at with this is, do our model curriculum standards need to address open entry, open exit? They currently don't. So is that something that as we move forward and start looking to revise the model curriculum standards for CTE, is that something that we need to look at? We've also heard over the last 2 years, districts come forward and they are doing this. Do we in the state plan want to profile those districts, those LEAs, the community college regions that are doing that good work? Can the state plan be something that our LEAs can use as a resource on promising practices and model programs?
I mean, part of what we heard this year and into last year with the joint advisory and a lot of the presentations we made were really focusing on the continuum of services and programs that students are able to access. And so we really think that beyond this work-based learning, other areas that we can really align and make sure that there's a sequence that students will go through. And that could just be the pathway study, or it could be the program study. So we're excited about that and sort of hanging our hat on some of the strategies that we've talked about this year.
Before you go on, Donna, we have a question up here, but I had a question in terms of what you had mentioned on the last slide of interspersing these essential questions. Do you want us to start with that last slide and begin that discussion first?
I think my thinking was that this was just the introduction to the essential questions. Each of the
Okay.
essential questions focuses on an area of the program of study or meeting the needs of our special populations. So I think we can move forward with that first question. That
Okay.
I've given
So
you.
then the first question that's posed, and it looks like Member Fawn has a response.
I guess I have a question to a question. So would you prefer that as you ask these questions that we would comment on each question and not wait until the very end when you ask? Okay.
I think for us, for our needs in putting together the transition plan for your review, I think it would be helpful to us to go question by
My
question.
question, I agree. So on this particular slide 10 here, how can state agencies design programs of study to allow for open entry, exit, and dual enrollment articulation agreements and credit transfer agreements? These three topics are near and dear to me because as a community college instructor working with now 3 or 4 high schools in a particular LEA not too far from here, I'm struggling, or we are struggling, because we have been meeting for 3 or 4 years, and I'm not going to name names or identification, but what can, since this is at a policy level, what can this committee or what can the two entities, CDE and Chancellor's Office, do to incentivize or encourage or coerce or whatever the term may be, to get the two campuses, the community college and the high school, to engage in meaningful dual enrollment programs, to have articulation agreements and things like that. And I'm curious as to what strategies, and I have seen other partnerships throughout the state that work very well in their own individual respective region, and we want to promote that to the best we can. But at the end of the day, it rests with that particular school board, with that superintendent, or with that high school principal, and maybe to some extent teachers. So I'm curious as to what would be the strategy or the path forward to encourage more dual enrollment and partnerships between the community college and high school. I guess it's a question that we can throw answers to, or maybe you have more information that you could share.
I think for me, what I have seen and where it's been successful, and I'm talking as a CTE teacher now, not as division director, but it starts with the teachers, as you talked about, bringing community college teachers and K through 12 teachers together for them to review their curriculum and look for the commonalities, and have K through 12 teachers talk to community college teachers about what is it to teach a high school student, with them collaborating. The strongest partnerships that ended up in dual enrollment or articulation that I saw was when those two teachers really collaborated, not just sat down together to create the agreement, but continued to collaborate to support those students in their programs. That's very time-consuming and very course by course, but I do believe, and I think we've heard from some of our districts and our community college regions, that for them, that's where the success starts, is with the teachers.
I think part of the solution here is what's already been done, and that's opening up the definition of what college credit means, or what to get credit for college means, and that could be dual enrollment, that can be articulation. So I think that's the first important part. It's not restricting people's or the LEAs or our practitioners in the field on how they're able to sort of deliver it. The other piece that I think gets at your point of incentivizing is it is part of the metrics. It is part of the outcomes that we're looking to incentivize these types of dual credit, dual enrollment types of programs. We know for a fact that AB 288 doesn't work in some areas. We know for a fact that there's got to be other mechanisms to sort of make that happen. So in looking at the barriers that will prevent the system from moving forward with this strategy. I think a lot of it's in place. We need to continue to incentivize it and say that this is an outcome metric that we're after, and take a look at how it scales. It's the way that we've done it in the community college system, because when we look at dual enrollment or other ways to do it within CTE, we compare that a lot with the A through G AP types of courses. And so we see a duality there, not separating, but a duality in terms of both leading to sort of college. So we think the ideas are there. We think the data sets are there. We think the outcomes are there. So those are areas that we'd like from a system office to continue to push forward.
Vice Chair Sun.
Thank you. So it's all great. So the articulation agreements, for instance, seems to would be campus, community college campus by campus. Is there a effort to maybe more systematize that?
Yeah. I want to say that earlier this year, in meeting with the chief instructional officers in various areas around the state, it was called out for, especially as K-12 strong workforce came around, our CIOs especially said, what if we were to convene a statewide discussion on dual enrollment and to actually get it back out there? We know that the toolkit for AB 288 is something that we currently use, but there's a lot of barriers that prevent that from happening. I think we have enough information now, having scaled this for a few years, that we can probably tackle some of those things. So
Isn't CAPMA statewide?
yeah, we do have another data set that we've put out there. It's called CAPMA. It's supposed to track dual enrollment. Same thing goes, though, with the CalPADS data set. I know that looking at dual enrollment courses is new, so I think we have to continue to look at the barriers. Same thing with curriculum approval. All of those things are barriers, potentials, right?
Member Rucker.
Well, I know we're looking at the essential question that's on slide 10, but I actually need to go back to slide 9. The landscape has changed considerably in California since the Perkins 4 plan was originally drafted and approved. And I do realize that there have been annual updates, but there are some really big policy questions that need to be considered as part of those essential questions in putting together this plan. And let me give you an example. The Perkins 5 created a definition about what a CTE concentrator is. This state has done a lot of work on trying to quantify who those students are and figure out a way to represent them in our database. I think an important essential question is, can we find those students in our database given all the issues in our data system that have to be addressed? So I think a big essential question is, what are the data system issues that we need that are either limiters or important supports in developing and implementing this plan? I think I read ahead in the slideshow and I didn't see that as a question. I hope that's an essential question that would be considered. There's the relationship between community colleges and K-12 programs has also changed significantly, requiring more connection and collaboration, both because of the adult ed programs, but also because of the 2 grants that we spent a great deal of time talking about this morning. So how is that work going to inform what the state plan shows? We've also changed the way we do school planning and school funding and focus on continuous improvement in schools. How does the work of the local control funding formula and what districts pay attention to in drafting that inform what the conversation looks like in writing this plan? One of the things that I found very exciting that we finally have been able to do is create an alignment between the LCAP itself and the consolidated application that districts need to develop and submit for as it relates to applying for federal funds. Is there a way to create an alignment in the planning and development for locals once the state plan is in place? So I think there's some major infrastructure questions that need to be part of these essential questions that also need to be considered. And so those are just examples of some of the ones that came to my mind. So while the essential questions that I know we're going to see here are really about your work and the work for crafting this initial plan, this basic transition plan, I think that even those essential questions inform the development of that essential plan, because those are questions we know are already some obstacles or some considerations and concerns that we need to have going forward. So I think we need to figure out, if not how to answer those questions and resolve some of those concerns, how to at least identify those as part of the planning in the transition plan, because it will inform the work of the legislature, the work of our board, and the work of the community college board as well.
Absolutely, Member Rucker. Those are key questions. Today's focus, as you know, is on the transition plan, but there is a document that was put together by Advanced CTE that runs through all of the elements of Perkins, and we will be using that with the core team from Community College, CDE, as well as our colleagues from special education, English language learners. That core team will be addressing all of those essential questions.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I read that document, and so that's the reason why I was asking that question, because they bring up some issues or some things that should be considered that, again, I read ahead in your slideshow that I didn't see here. So I want to make sure, if we're going to go question by question, to make sure that we're being comprehensive in what's addressed or considered in crafting the transition plan.
Absolutely.
Your point's well made with that too. The other one I would bring up too is the alignment with the single plan for student achievement, in addition to the CONAP and the other sort of guiding documents that an LEA will use. So it's nice that we have alignment of those over the years. I remember when accreditation finally said we're going to accept the single plan for student achievement goals and sort of move those forward. That was a huge alignment, right? So it sounds like it's that type of alignment, if I could just tease. Okay, good.
I want to make sure that we can capture as many comments as possible before Member Ortiz-Lincoln has to depart. So, yes, ma'am.
I think since we went back to sort of a general slide, I think for me, and maybe I missed this because I did miss the past two meetings, there's been a lot of changes and reforms on the community college end, the push for free tuition from 1 year, now it's moving to 2, the weighted formula. I have very thin knowledge of some of those things, and I'm not even sure that we're targeting the same student groups. When we talk about our weighted formula, we're looking at foster youth, English learners, low income, and some of those students fall within the special populations that are cited here. So I'm wondering, that forced us to start collecting data, for instance, for foster youth. So as we're looking at the special populations, I'm wondering, do we have data on both sides of the systems, and who are the focus groups under your weighted formula? It could be a totally different weighted formula. So I think just for me, it would be nice to have a comprehensive understanding of what it means so that we could start looking to see how we could adhere it and streamline it a little bit better. Thank you.
Vice Chair Sun?
Yeah, and I think what you might be hearing is, as I'm looking at this question on 10, it's a really broad question for us to try to answer when we don't have some of the background knowledge of the other side and what's going on there. So I think it'd be helpful if the staff had some initial ideas, perhaps, because I imagine what we have to address actually in the transition plan is how we are currently doing it and how we will develop to do it better. And I don't think we have the background knowledge to be able to answer that question for you.
So would you like us to go back and sort of put more specificity to this one going forward?
I guess it might be having to hone down these essential questions a little bit and glean from what a direction that you would like for us to go. Like, for instance, in order to have design programs to study that allow for open entry and exit, we would need to, we may want to have one system in which, I don't know, students want to enroll, and would both sides, the people on the committee, recommend that the CDE, and I'm just making this up right now, and like community college system design a system together, and that I think would help us narrow a little bit, and so that we can Yeah, so that we can provide you more direct feedback.
So what I'm hearing is perhaps in the transition plan that we bring to you around programs of study, some ideas of some ways to address these for you to weigh in on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
The objective of looking at the intersegmental relationship.
Yes.
Sounds like that's a priority
Yeah.
for the board.
I have to applaud you both for the types of questions you ask, because you ask how. And we cannot up here answer the how questions in all of these elements by a flick of fingers like that. And I guess if you were to ask, should we include these items into our strategic plan or in our enhanced plan, the answer to that question is yes. I don't know if it's fair for us to sit up here, the 5 or 8 of us, who say, okay, this is how you do it, particularly when half of us don't have the information on dual enrollment and articulation agreements and whatnot. So I guess the topics, should they be included? The answer to that for me is yes. In terms of how, I think I would look to staff to suggest some strategies.
And,
Sure,
go ahead.
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
And that kind of follows on to slide 11 when you're trying to ask, how should we include the UCs and the A through G programs and all this stuff? I think that should be part of the new plan. One minor thing that I can see is that, and we're looking at articulation agreements. This just happened 2 months ago when I was in a meeting. The high school teachers asked me, what class are you teaching? I said, I'm teaching this business class, intro to entrepreneurship. And they brought with them a textbook for the entrepreneurship class. And they said, okay, this is the textbook we're using. If I teach this class at the high school, can that then be articulated to your college course on the same topic? So I read through all the chapters, skimmed through the topics, and I said, well, the topics are there, but on this particular topic, you had devoted 2 pages. This textbook devoted 2 pages, whereas in my college textbook, we devoted 6 or 7 pages. So for us at the community college to accept the same topic of a course where there's only 2 pages devoted to it and said that you've covered, the forms of business, that may not be enough. And that's where I see the challenge in terms of articulation, in terms of integration of curriculum. And then when you get to the UC, they said, oh no, we devote 15 pages to this particular topic. Where is the common ground with respect to articulation? And that, I think, is where the devil is in the details.
Yeah.
And then we cannot sit here and legislate or tell you what it ought to be when we don't have enough information. So I just want to highlight that challenge.
Yeah, and like I think even for that question, if it were instead of how can state agencies, in what ways could state agencies assist programs to allow for open entry and exit? If you ask that question, then we can, from our background experience, I tell you, I don't want to go to 5 different community college campuses to ask for articulation and go through that process. So if I had even a template of some sort that I can just fill out and say, and take it around, then that's great. That's awesome. So those are, I think, if you ask the question in the right way, I think we would be more helpful.
Does that provide you with the level of feedback that you were anticipating?
It does, and I anticipated that was going to be your response. I think some of these questions that I put together, I'm hoping, particularly the next question, are there areas that the committee would want to stay away from? Like in the programs of study, proprietary programs, things like that. I think that's where we need some guidance. Are there concerns that the committee would have if we at the state level put together programs of study that used UCCIA courses or proprietary programs that may be difficult for some districts to adopt or to teach. So I think that's where I was kind of going with these questions. I understand that we need to make the recommendations that you then weigh in on. But I just wanted to get some initial thoughts from the committee so that we don't go off in a direction that the committee does not approve of.
We appreciate your reaction to the questions that have been happening so far. It does help us.
Member Ortiz-Lincoln?
Yes, I was just feeling like it was so broad and so big, but I'm glad that you're looking for more like, let's not touch that. I do agree with Board Member Sun that, and first let me own that I feel that you're bringing us these questions that are broad because we've already said don't run ahead of us, but now we're saying run a little bit ahead of us. It's like we still do want you to run a little bit ahead of us because it's easier for us to say, if you bring us something, we don't like that, let's strengthen that, let's highlight that, versus, okay, it's, you know, we have 2 hours to brainstorm on everything that should be, when we may be telling you something that's already in place, right? And so we don't know what we don't know. So that would be one thing. I do appreciate a little bit more guidance. I was thinking of the book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, right? Because it could really take us down that pathway. But I do like the idea of us just now saying, definitely let's look at this or definitely not. But I would hope a little bit more guidance or recommendations. Thank you.
So moving on to our next question, on programs, specifically on programs of study, the advantages and drawbacks to some of the courses that we have talked about over the last 2 years. The University of California Curriculum Integration courses. Those are the integrated courses that are general education, math, science, English, those courses that also have a CTE context. Those are available for adoption, and I know many districts are adopting those as alternatives to the regular core curriculum in those general education topics. The university A through G approved CTE courses, proprietary courses. We have many districts in the K through 12 level that are using these proprietary courses. They generally have costs to them, not large costs, but there are costs. And then some of our ROPs are particularly looking at mixed or online CTE courses. So I guess my question here is, how much variety, how innovative do we want to be in designing these state programs of study, with keeping in mind that these state programs of study could be adopted at the local level? Are there areas that we want to stay away from because there are costs associated with them? Those type of things.
Can I ask whether or not any of those costs could be covered under Perkins allocations or strong workforce allocations or CTEG allocations?
You know, in terms of delivery of the CTE program, yeah, if it's contract ed or non-credit or credit, you know, those are all areas that, and then colleges can generate FTES from it or ADA. So on the last one, I'd say, yeah, it really comes into the proprietary courses and, you know, how much out of the box. If we're after reduction of duplication, then it makes sense to look at different public and private to see where they all sort of play together. And maybe just accounting for some of it. But things like the UCCI is very much ingrained with what's going on in many systems right now. So it's taking that and maybe building upon it. So I guess doing an assessment on it and seeing from there. But again, looking for your comments.
I'll come to this side first and then I'll move over. Member Rucker?
All right, so without trying to start an argument, I'm just going to say each of those terms, each of those 4 bullets will start an argument at the local level.
Yes, they will.
So let me suggest that, again, maybe the question could be, because these answers will be different regionally. That's the reason why on the ground this will start an argument. Maybe massage the question to look at what among all of the regions or across the state, what are the options of the diversity of programs that have been implemented using these particular models, or using these particular models, for example. The reason I'm suggesting that, particularly with the A to G issue, Because many career technical education programs have a difficult time being approved or recognized as A-to-G courses, I think one of the things that should also be recognized is the work of the UCOP in working with high schools to develop these programs and to develop ways that the programs meet the framework, but also meet the criteria for the university, because that's an ongoing discussion, that's ongoing strong leadership that we have an opportunity to recognize in this grant that frankly was not in place when the Perkins 4 plan was originally approved. I think that there's an opportunity to bring that conversation in and quell the arguments we already know are going to happen.
Before I come to Vice Chair Sun, I just heard our Oakland location. Is it possible that Amy Costa came back into the Oakland location, or are they just reestablishing their connection with us?
Hi, this is Deborah. Amy did not return, and we just reestablished the connection. But we had been on. We just got kicked off. We're right back on.
Thank you very much. I didn't know if someone was trying to do this in a digital environment.
No,
just wave
it's
their hands and be recognized. Vice Chair Sun.
Yeah, so my big essential question to this question is, how realistic is it to develop a universal course that would be accepted by UC, community colleges, and by high schools? Because
Is that the ask that you want us to do? Or?
Right, I mean, that would be the ideal goal, right, for us. And I don't know enough about the articulation between community colleges and UCs. I do know how I can get courses approved A through G through UCOP. So but I don't know all the different steps. So how realistic is it that we could develop a course that UC could nod to and community colleges and the state universities would nod to?
I can speak in my former district. We were able to do it. We created agreements that community college accepted that were also UC acceptable. So it is possible to do. It takes that collaboration across systems, and it really takes those teachers, again, sitting down and making sure that I'm spending 6 pages on it, you're spending 15, where's the agreement? But it is possible.
Right, and so instead of one school going to each of these different, if we could convene somebody from each of those areas to look at these courses at the same time together and do kind of the approval on all sides, rather than, because that's awesome to hear that you were able to do that. Yeah. So we know it's doable, but you probably had to run to this person and run to this person, right? So if there is a team that could be formed at the state level that looks at some of these, I think that would be ideal.
And I remember in 2005, 2006, when CTE was rebranded in K-12 to Career Technical Education, and there was a push for A through G approval of CTE courses. And I remember at the local districts, we would insert more literacy in them. I mean, those are the pieces that we would do to make them UC approvable. So it's almost as if we need to duplicate that same process with dual enrollment or something else. In other words, how do you bring it to the level that it needs to be at?
So if we were to convene a statewide task force from each of these systems to design specific courses in the CTE areas that would meet these needs, even if we got a dozen through, right?
So I think that would serve some of the things we're hearing coming out of the legislature as well, in terms of the types of programs that they want to continue to fund or drill down to. So it would maybe begin to identify what those would look like too. That's a great idea.
Right, and then our grants could incentivize the schools and high schools that do adopt and take these courses and offer them within their program study.
I'm having a sense of deja vu right now, because what's being described is the formulation of our CID system with the transformer model curriculum, the descriptor reviews that are done by the partners. It just goes one level down into the high schools, but that structure could be emulated in this vein. Was there another comment?
And while doing so, we must preserve the rigor of the course.
Yeah,
Of course,
absolutely.
Bottom line.
We appreciate that, Dr. Finn.
Absolutely. Perkins 5 makes a major change with regards to middle school funding. Currently, Perkins 4 only allows funding down to 7th grade. Perkins 5 uses the definition of middle school that comes out of ESSA, which means that funding can go all the way down to 5th grade. Keep in mind that the funding for Perkins has not increased. So allocations, if a district chose to go down to 5th grade, the money is not going to increase, so that's going to thin out where that money is spent. So again, I think something that we will need to bring to you are our recommendations around, do we allow an LAA to go down to 5th grade with exploratory CTE? And what if there isn't a high school program for that continuum or a community college program? Is the benefit for early exploration in career awareness and career guidance, is that sufficient while a district continues to build out their career technical education? So I think that's something we need to look at, get field feedback, and come back with a recommendation. But I was curious as to any thoughts the committee might have about that, since it is dramatically, it goes down 2 additional grades now.
Member Rucker.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand the question you asked. Are you suggesting with your question that we prioritize the grades or the programs that would receive this funding in the state plan? Or are you suggesting that districts would have to think about what it would mean, the redistribution of funds to include grades, the 5th and 6th grades, because that will change the funding picture, that they need to locally make prioritization on how to allocate or appropriate their funds?
Both. I mean, if a school district is going to spend those funds that have really been primarily allocated for grades 9 through 12, and they choose to go down all the way into 5th grade, that's going to change the funding. And what about the continuation and support of those current high school programs? And what about a small or a rural district that perhaps doesn't have a full contingent of CTE high school courses? Would we want them to go down to middle school if those high school programs don't exist? I think perhaps the question is, what are we going to prioritize? Is it
all right,
still...
so my initial, and I'm being very honest when I say this, my initial knee-jerk reaction to that question, that's not our business. That's a local decision and a local concern. I don't think we should use the state plan to tell districts whether or not they should decide to fund CTE programs or exploration in grade 5. I don't think that's something we should address in the plan. It should be a local determination. That's the purpose of the LCAP. And let's be clear, we have an obligation to help districts figure out how to deal with their special populations and how to target students. I'm absolutely willing to bet, without looking at a single item in the dashboard, that districts that are currently being identified as underperforming districts probably need to figure out how to target those special populations. So I think we need to stay out of that question and away from telling districts, don't spend money in the lower grades.
It's interesting, some of the comments that we got back on the principals, a few of them had to do with reaching down deeper. And so I think that it's something that we're seeing in some of the surveys that we're putting out. It's certainly a question when we talk about K-12 strong workforce, because it is dialed in that it's 7 through 12. So that the legitimacy of the question becomes more relevant with a 7 through 12 restriction. And so, and LEAs are asking, should we do this? So the question is that something that we were always up for early career exploration, but how do we sort of translate that and respond to people? That's the...
Okay, but I'm going to say again, because there is a policy expectation in this statute that expects districts to consider it, it should not be the state's role to tell them, don't do that, and here's the reason why.
Vice Chair Ting?
It's okay. And so now going back to our principles, the essential elements, one of the essential elements, G, is the strong presence of career exploration and student support as an essential component for establishing a learning plan for all K through 14 students. So while I agree with Board Member Rucker that we should not be prescribing to the LEAs what they can and cannot do, what we would be looking for is a strong learning plan. And I would think that a strong learning plan would be as expansive as possible. And so they can concentrate the learning plan between 6th and 12th grade, or they concentrate the learning plan between 5th and 8th grade. That's okay, but it's just more around the strong learning plan piece of it. Yeah, it's a local, but it is a local decision. So that's what I don't think it's about, let's try to get just more CTE programs in high schools. I think as long as they are along that learning plan, they have a strong argument for how that then establishes students. I think we're good.
Any other comments on this item?
Barriers. We've heard through the last 2 years around work-based learning experiences that our LEAs experience barriers around liability issues, getting access to work-based learning experiences, particularly on-site work-based learning experiences. And I'm asking the question particularly around our special populations. Frequently, there are concerns from CTE teachers about placing students with special needs into a work-based learning experiences, primarily around safety, things like that. But again, and it's probably, again, a recommendation that we bring back to you, but how do we address those barriers, particularly around CTE programs that are building trades and construction, auto tech, things like that, where there are safety issues for students? And how do we encourage our LEAs to make sure that all students are obtaining work-based learning experiences, not just the best and the brightest?
Have any feedback we can give on this one? It is such a it is such a perplexing issue. It almost wants the initial response to be, how do we incentivize employers to take on that additional responsibility or liability that they could be opening themselves up to? My goodness. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, this one's huge because you started with some of the barriers that are more physical barriers or barriers of liability or having an environment that is safe. But some other barriers could be barriers like a student not having a social security number, and it's a special population that we want to serve, that would not allow that child or that student or that youth to have a work-based experience. And so there's so many different levels of, and then you also mentioned something that's more access versus, and the access is a self-imposed barrier. Somebody said that in our meeting yesterday, and I think that that's true. So there's barriers, and then there's just things that we need to deal with in terms of access. So maybe teasing those two things out, because as I'm looking at this, I think it has to be data-driven to see who are the students that are not part of these work-based learning opportunities, and then we scale back and say why, or speculate why, and then peel back and say what are the barriers that are created or imposed for that student population. So I think we need to tease it out and get the onion going. Yeah.
Member Rucker.
I think there's also some infrastructure barriers that have to be considered that differentiate infrastructure issues in rural communities, suburban communities, and as well as metropolitan or urban communities. The primary example I can give, most rural communities may not have a single large employer that's able to provide the type of work-based learning that would be modeled in many of these applications. Or a simpler example, looking right here in Sacramento, even though we consider Sacramento a major metropolitan area, there's a difference between who the employers are in the Sacramento metropolitan area and who are the employers or businesses out in the suburbs that would likely also be available to students to provide or create these work-based learning opportunities. So here in Sacramento, for students who would be participating in work-based learning, if they live in North Highlands, are they going to have transportation to get to an area that's more remote from where they live? Or is there going to be a difference in what the types of employment or industry sectors are that would be available and can be offered. So I think that that also is a significant and critical barrier to consider. And how do you create the collaboration? Because again, in this metropolitan area, there are multiple school districts, which means multiple entities or LEAs competing for the same fields or opportunities for work-based learning. That can become a critical barrier as well.
One additional comment, just to go back to the special populations. And one of the things that we look at as a huge barrier is that with the high school exit exam going away and such, and we know that students are back on the diploma track, but we still have a number of our special needs students that are not diploma track, nor do they get and then they come out with a certificate of completion. So the worry for us is the employability with just a certificate of completion. What's the value for an employer based on it? So we look at those things and we say, how can we sort of give the student, especially one that's going through a sequence of courses, and even though they have special needs, how do we sort of create something of value for them as they're coming out? And maybe that is the work-based learning piece, but we do see a hard stop on some of these areas, especially with our special pops.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that's something else that has changed since the Perkins 4 plan was reauthorized. The Supreme Court has made a ruling that even students with an IEP have a right to expect to be on a track toward graduation.
Absolutely.
And have the same academic outcomes as their peers in a regular general education program. And I heard yesterday that there are many LEAs that put students on certain types of IEPs in the certificate of completion track, and that Supreme Court ruling says that's a practice that has to stop. So I'm not sure I want to call it a barrier, but it is a change in policy and mandate that didn't exist with our previous plan. And we as a state, we haven't figured out yet how to address all of those things, but that's a special population with a specific policy mandate that has changed considerably since the last time we worked on a plan for this.
Good point.
I think one other area that I would throw out to the committee is, in the past, our non-allowables list has been very restrictive around how districts can spend those funds, particularly for things like liability insurance for students who are going out in healthcare. If we can, and the committee can approve a more lenient non-allowables list, then that could be some way of overcoming those barriers to work-based learning as well, so that those students could get liability insurance and healthcare facilities would be comfortable opening up their doors to having students serve internships.
Any other comments up here before they move on? Okay.
I think this is a key question around how we both deliver in the different delivery systems for career tech ed. In K through 12, there is more of an emphasis on exploration and awareness and student interest. We do want labor market as a component of our pathways, but it's a mixture of student interest and exploration, as well as post-secondary preparation versus community college, which is much more labor market driven around their CTE programs. Where, I think, does that alignment take place? Where do we want the alignment across those? And where is it okay for the two systems to be different within the Perkins State Plan?
Board Member Fawn.
Yeah, I think on this particular question, in my perspective, they can be different goals, so long as they are not opposing goals. I think in the different goals, they could be different levels of goals. I clearly don't see or don't mind having K-12 focus on awareness and exploration and preparation for post-secondary, because that feeds into the community colleges or beyond. I'm not sure if we need to work extra hard to bridge the differences here, because one feeds to the next, and I view them as different levels, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so on this particular topic, so long as we can work to minimize the opposition of goals, but not the different or layering of goals, is where my head is on this particular question.
Vice Chair Sun.
Going to sound like a broken record. So if we go back to our guiding principles, I don't see this being an issue. I completely agree that we could use our guiding principles as helping us to thread, but I don't think we need to try to jam our objectives or goals together. But as a thread, as long as we're following along that thread, I think we can assure that we won't be opposing each other, but we're also actually stronger because we've got a common theme that we're following.
Other comments on this item? The first thing that comes to mind for me with interest in exploration and labor market is the buffet that we put out, and they get to choose from that buffet, which is their exploration and interest generation.
We know there's certain programs that are probably better suitable for K-12 because of legal reasons and labor reasons, and some better suited for colleges. So how can we sort of make those align and be a continuum?
Madam Chair, I think the staffer is trying to hammer our brains here by answering all of these questions.
Are you experiencing Sacramento fatigue?
We got at least.
I gotta say, this is tough.
Your payment's in the mail.
So the next question addresses our state initiatives, particularly in K through 12, local control dollars, and then the regional partnerships that have been established under earlier funding mechanisms like the California Career Pathways Trust, the earlier CTIG, Strong Workforce, Guided Pathways. But are there opportunities in the state plan to encourage, or again, as we look at non-allowable lists, to encourage districts to use local control dollars to, again, possibly fund things like dual enrollment, early college credit, things like that. Programs like certified nursing assistant, medical assistant, those are careers that are taken at the community college level that lead directly to jobs. Perkins can fund some of that, but in some cases, those courses have extensive material costs to them, uniforms, things like that, immunizations. Is there an opportunity there for the state agency to incentivize the use of funds for those type of dual enrollment, early college credit opportunities? And would the committee object to us allowing the freedom of that type of funding and encourage the use of local control dollars to support that? Again, with the idea that Perkins should always supplement.
Let's start with our member Ortiz Lincoln.
Thank you. I really like the idea of looking to see how we could leverage funds. I would like to see some bright spots. I know that I tend to be biased towards Southern California because it's the best part of the state, but but Long Beach has done great work, and maybe I just need to. It would be great to see what communities like Long Beach, what they've done with the Long Beach Promise. But I know that they also had the mayor joined in the initiative, and they started a push for regional internships. So they have a nonprofit or a foundation called CALL, and then you have Long Beach City College receive trust, and as well as the funds with Long Beach Unified. And so they have the internships through the district, they have the mayor's initiative to place students, and then of course there's a lot of regional partners. So, and I know that that's a unique situation and that there's areas where we don't have those partnerships, or they're not developed to allow for that. This is a unique case that you have the three systems all in one footprint in one city. But I think it would be great to see what is the possibility, right? Because oftentimes people are working in silos without realizing you could actually leverage funds if you just work together. So maybe highlighting for us some examples, but also I would definitely agree with leveraging funds.
And holding up Long Beach as the shining star of how to do it well.
Well noted.
Another thing I might suggest to the committee too that we haven't heard from is we haven't heard anything from our regions or our districts or community colleges who have used the resource of an intermediary like alignment Coachella Valley, those type of things. We haven't had them present, so that might be something going forward that you might want to hear from, because that's not only leveraging those funds, but leveraging community resources to support the efforts.
It's interesting, the conversation that we have in the engagement meetings for K-12 Strong Workforce is really about leveraging the funds, and it's how to onboard with the LCAP, it's how to onboard with other funds, it's how to know that Strong Workforce funds are there to help with it. So folks are interested, so they just need to know how to do it.
And then kind of going back to what Member Rucker mentioned at the very beginning, some additional questions that we are going to have to address as we move forward into the larger whole Perkins State 5. The recruitment and preparation of CTE instructors. I think we need to look at the idea of minimum qualifications as well within the state plan. Academic and career counseling jointly, particularly within the K through 12 system. The work-based learning questions, industry support for career technical education, their voice in the development of the plan. The alignment of our programs of study. What do we do when a local district submits something, a program of study that maybe isn't, we're not seeing the alignment to local labor market? So there isn't, as you said, a smorgasbord or a buffet for students to go to. And then finally, a very, very large question, the alignment of Perkins 5 to both ESSA and WIOA, and how close do we want that alignment to take place beyond just the core indicators or the definitions that are shared between those federal acts. Moving on, the second narrative asks for questions around meeting the needs of our special populations. And you should know that Perkins 5 does an extensive expansion of special populations. Currently, in addition to the prior definitions, they have added low-income youth and adults, out-of-work individuals, English learners, homeless individuals as defined by McKinney-Vento, youth who have aged out of the foster care system, and youth whose parents are active members of the armed services. So a much larger special populations that we will need to address. In the Perkins Guide, they are asking for us to describe program strategies that ensuring equal access, elimination of any discriminatory practices to enrollment, how our programs are designed to enable special populations to meet the state level performance indicators, appropriate accommodations for learning, and then instruction and work-based learning that is in integrated settings for our special needs populations. And again, going back to our guiding policy principles, again, Gorilla Glue, appropriate accommodation to ensure academic achievement and skills attainment in career tech ed. The instruction and work-based learning opportunities are offered in integrated settings. Equity and access, eliminating any discriminatory practices to enrollment, and then ensuring access to student supports for the full range of CTE activities, not just what occurs in the classroom. Continuous improvement, again, high skill, high wage, in-demand careers. And then some of our state priorities that will lead the development of this state plan. Working with our Department of Health and Human Services, our Workforce Innovations and Opportunity State Plan, the Department of Education Guide to Secondary Transition for our special populations, and then on the community college side, the disabled student programs and services. And again, those are just a few of the state priorities that need to be taken into account as we develop the state plan. Here, I've highlighted one of the key changes in Perkins 5. There now within Perkins 5 is going to be a CTE evaluation tool or a comprehensive assessment tool that is going to be required every 2 years as part of the Perkins 5 application for our locals. So we need to start looking at the data and how we pull that data for our special populations and how we can use that evaluation tool to promote practices around equity and access and eliminating discrimination. So I think data, I think professional development for our teachers, more collaboration between special education teachers and CTE teachers. I don't think my experience was probably unique, but for 17 years in the CTE classroom, continuation school, community day school, there were only twice when I was brought into the planning of an ITP. And I don't know that that's unique. So I think there is a lot of work, and I think this state plan can help guide some of that work on the local level, particularly this comprehensive assessment program. And then in some cases, as what I mentioned earlier, we have CTE programs where there is a high risk for potential injury in some of the technology programs. That CTE teacher needs CTE teacher trained aides in that classroom to help with the accommodation, those type of things. So I think there's some work that we need to do and make some really specific recommendations, the committee does, around how we help our CTE educators in our districts do this.
Yes, ma'am.
A clarifying question, because I feel like we're using, I don't know if when I look at special populations, I'm looking at the way Perkins 5 is defining that. But when we're looking at promote inclusion of students with special needs, that sounds like students with disabilities or unique abilities. But I feel like we're using those interchangeably, because special needs could be a homeless student, and special needs could be language. And so in this respect, are we using special needs as unique abilities? Or are we using for students with disabilities, or are we using it as the student population? I feel like we're going back and forth. And maybe it's just the examples that you're providing, which have to do more with, is there proper on-ramps? Is it a safe environment, ADA compliant? So can you clarify what the special needs is?
Yes, I think what I focused on are students with disabilities, those particular barriers. But no, in the case of special populations, it's addressing the needs of all of the special populations identified within Perkins. Thank you.
Were there any other? Yes, Pam.
Well, that was one of the two questions I also had, because we can't use those two terms of art as if they mean the same thing. My second question was, I'm a little confused about the evaluation tool. There's some terms of art that are being used for evaluation. I'm not clear on who needs to contribute to what is collected for that evaluation tool. And then I'm not sure who sees the information that is developed from that tool. So could you give a little more information about the evaluation tool itself?
Perkins 5 refers to it as a comprehensive evaluation program evaluation, and it's necessary every 2 years as part of the Perkins application on the local level. So we will be, at the state level, we'll be designing that comprehensive tool as part of the local application process. And we will be reviewing those as part of the application. That's how it's, at this point with Perkins, that's how it's laid out in my understanding.
Okay, so let me tell you what I heard you say. The statute requires the state to have an evaluation process for locals that apply for and receive these funds.
Correct.
The tool itself will be developed by the state and used by each of the LEAs. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so then my question as it relates, I wanted to make sure I understood that. My question as it relates to that is that, are you seeing as part of the implementation of this any regulatory or statutory change that's needed in our state to implement any of the requirements for this? And then further, is there a budget change proposal related to any of these requirements? Because that's some man hours that are required for doing that work. I'm sorry, that's some person hours that are required for doing that work at the local level. Do you have any idea about the amount of time that districts would be required to do or to use to get that work done?
The Perkins 5 Act does tell locals that they can use some of their admin dollars for completing that comprehensive evaluation. So yes, that is allocated in Perkins that they can use that. Yes.
Are you looking at this, designing this to be like a program review type of document, or a checklist, or?
I think for us on the K through 12 side, and again, it would be ideal if this comprehensive needs assessment could be designed jointly so that it could be used across both systems. But I think what we're looking at is something similar to what we did with CTIG this time, an evaluation rubric that basically defines what we're looking at for quality. But similar to what we did with CTIG, where we asked our LEAs to evaluate holistically their programs, but also tell us where their areas of improvement are and how they're going to use the funds to do that. Perkins is asking the same thing of the local recipients. Do a comprehensive needs assessment, tell us what the needs are, and tell us how you're going to use those dollars to address those needs, to improve your career tech ed programs.
Okay. So if I were to liken it like our LCAP process where we have our state priorities and there are elements of those state priorities, could we, going back again to our principles, could those be the framework for this kind of evaluation tool, and they can address how far we are on it, what else we might need to do to get better at it or get more to it?
Absolutely, you're a step ahead of me.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
that's exactly what we're thinking, as well as implementing the essential elements, since they are really programmatic at that level.
Yeah.
Yes, both of them.
Okay.
And it should be a continuum to the community colleges
Yes.
as well. It should be
Right.
a seamless sequence of where do students travel given their specific needs.
Yeah, that's great.
The role of counseling and career exploration in breaking down barriers. We are doing work across the board, but inclusive supports around that continuation of learning, early exploration in middle schools. Again, I think there is some policy or some recommendations that the committee can make around counseling support for students of special populations and with special needs. Particularly, I think, in the professional development area for our CTE teachers.
You know, going back to some of the teacher prep stuff and the need for CTE teachers as well, to prioritize that from this joint advisory would be a good thing as well, to say that that is a pathway that we really, in a sequence of courses, that we really need to pay attention to. Sometimes I don't see the dollars flowing down or the call out for it. And there may be more of a specific ask from this body that could help us to give us some air cover for that. So just throwing that out there. It's underfunded.
And then this question, and we're starting to get questions from the field of when are we going to update the CTE model curriculum standards? And my response to that question is after the state plan is done, one thing at a time, folks. But I think we do need to, in essence of the emphasis on special populations within Perkins, look at the CTE model curriculum standards again around industry-informed practices and the scaffolding of those standards for creating access with students with special needs, inclusion of CTE teachers in the ITP process, student leadership development, our career tech ed student organizations. What are they doing? Because they are a part of the CTE delivery system as well. So we need to address all areas of the CTE delivery system.
Vice Chair Sun, did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
No, no, I just wasn't, yeah, again, I think it's the way these questions are framed. It's like, wow, there's more information I need on this before I can be useful in providing any direction.
Understood.
Can we give them any suggestions for information to bring back to us to help inform our responses to them so that they're not leaving us with these questions for which we say we need more information, but we weren't quite prescriptive enough to give them an idea of what to go searching for to present to us?
Well, what I'm finding with these last set of questions is there's a focus on inclusion of students with special needs, and we established that special needs is not, it's special student populations, not just special needs, as in students on IEPs. So if that is the case, then it feels like the emphasis in trying to address this is more of a focus on access and equity, and how do we bring students, special population students, into this system. They have a harder time accessing that. So it feels like the focus that we might want to either channel funds or emphasize would be around the different ways that we can support students of special populations rather than more of these. I'm not sure if that's understandable. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess if I can paraphrase is that, yes, we need to provide access to those students with or special populations, right, or special needs. as to the questions of how we can do that, what mechanism, what strategies. I think we're not up here to provide that to you,
Right.
but we're giving you the flexibility and the latitude to come up and through your research, explore whatever means, whether it's additional assistance that a CTE instructor needs in order to serve that particular student or group of students in his or her classroom, then that could be a strategy. Whether it is to go out to certain communities and recruit more of those students into the classroom, let that be a strategy. I think what we're saying is that, yes, we want you to provide as great of an access as possible to this population, but we probably can't give you the answers as to how. I don't know if that's what you're suggesting, but I think that's my thinking on this.
Thank you, Member Fawn. Member Ortiz Rincon.
Yeah, no, I like to give the how when it comes to bringing equity to our special populations. But I'm trying to think, because I have been gone for 2 meetings, there's a little bit of a gap in my own learning and understanding of where we're at. When I think of ESSA, and only for the sake of, I need an anchor. When I think of ESSA, the law was going through regulations, then there was a template, then we had very robust discussions about indicators so that we could get at those special populations, and then we could say, we're not going to tell you how to do it, but we're going to tell you what you need to do in order to bring equity to these students based on these indicators, right? And so I'm looking at the CTE evaluation tool that will come up. I think that's one way of setting the expectation. And also trying to gauge what's happening. But as we're looking at Perkins 5, I know we have to look at a transition plan, but when does the template come out? Where are we? Are they still negotiating regulations at the federal level? And then we'll get, after they go through their regs process, we'll get a template, and then we'll be able to fine tune all of this work that we're doing. I'm sorry, I think I'm a little behind.
No, Member Ortiz-Lacon, you're not behind. This is the frustration that we're having right now, because they are asking us for information that we can't possibly give them in this transition plan because we haven't determined what the state level performance indicators are. So they're asking us for data that we're not going to get until we have a Perkins 5 plan in place. And so this is where some of the frustration is coming from. You're just expressing it better than I can.
An important question to ask, though, so thank you.
And then again, looking ahead at some additional narrative that we will have to do is on fiscal responsibility.
No.
The negotiation of split between, oops.
No, before we leave this topic on, one of the things is Christian Wright, who's the director of special ed, does a lot of work with the Department of Rehabilitation. So we should probably bring them into the picture on this, because there might even be ways of synthesizing funding sources and creating new opportunities. So I think that would just be a good way of bolstering Perkins with IDEA, with Department of Rehab funding, because we often think of our obligation for students with special needs ending at after they leave high school. Actually, there's a post-secondary obligation as well. So I think it might be a good way. And then I think the other thing, we probably should also get a little bit more, in talking about this, talk a little bit more about ADA and the rights that people have under that, so that it's not seen as just we're being nice, but actually, I like the term we heard yesterday, warm advocacy. And so we can give those students also a sense of what rights they have as an employee and going into the workforce, and that itself might be a better way of approaching this.
Thank you so much. That is a great.
And I'm Tom Adams. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for the Teaching and Learning Support Branch. So.
And an invaluable member of this discussion, because you brought back what is natural for us to overlook if we don't bring in our other partners as foundational to these discussions.
And I should mention, Dr. Adams reminded me too, Matt and I have been doing presentations at the Department of Rehab on the work that we're doing. So there is a partnership there, and I have reached out to our Director of Special Education as well as our Director of English Learners to find or us have them assign committee members to this core work team on Perkins 5. So we want to make sure that this is fully integrated and everybody's voice is heard.
And it did influence the writing of the RFA too, those comments from both agencies. So it was very, very welcome. So we're happy about that.
And then finally, as I said, looking ahead on the fiscal responsibilities, the negotiation of the split between community college and CDE, the negotiation of the MOU between the state agencies, that use of reserve. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, the reserve has gone from 10 to 15%. How do we want to use that reserve? And then awarding and distribution of funding. So this is a third narrative. We're not ready for that yet. We need to do the first two narratives because they are much more extensive than this fiscal responsibilities narrative is. Next steps, we're going to take the information and the guidance and the questions and the recommendations that you made today to start putting together the transition plan. Final guidance, as we know of right now, is that the final guidance document for the submission of state plans will come out in mid-January. We still have our fingers crossed. The complete draft of the transition plan, at this point, we believe needs to be presented to the Joint Advisory Committee, the State Board of Education, and even possibly the governor. That is, again, something that we are waiting for information from OCTAE. And then we are starting to work on developing a timeline for stakeholder feedback and doing some surveys out to the stakeholders and perhaps some focus groups on some of the really key areas where we see a lot of differences between Perkins 4 and Perkins 5. So that's kind of a synopsis, very quick, of the work that's going forward.
And these timelines could be impacted by what's currently going on with our federal government.
Yes, very much so.
Can I?
Please.
So I have a technical question. So back to the fiscal responsibilities, just to clarify, this CDE is the fiscal agent. So if we were to apply, the funds would come from DED to CDE.
Correct.
And then whatever we negotiate through our MOU would be channeled to community colleges. That's how these funds. And then if there were, what is the compliance and audit from the federal, from the feds, when if they were to come in and look at if we really did utilize the funds in the way that we applied, would we ask the community colleges to report back how they use those funds, or how?
So you're talking about a federal program monitoring visit.
Yeah.
We just went through one in February 2017, I believe, shortly after I started. Yes, it is a joint review. They come and they visit with CDE. They ask for our evidence, also the community college. So it is generally a week to maybe 2-week visit that that OCTAE comes.
Okay, great. And then based on this guideline, knowing that there's some flexibility depending on what happens with the federal shutdown, is it realistic to expect a draft transition plan in February?
Yes.
On our February 19th meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Given, again, the directive that we got from our federal attorneys of be brief, be concise, just simply answer the questions, put the majority of the work around the full state plan. So, yes.
And also just add, since we have not seen this as a body, that even if it's a very rough draft prior to the 19th or even later this month, just so that we get a kind of a sense of it, knowing that it's a complete draft, and it could even be lots of blanks within it so that we kind of see what it looks like, might help provide some feedback early so that we could utilize that February 19th.
I have cleared my calendar.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from members of the Joint Advisory Committee before we thank our co-presenters? Thank you so much, Matt and Donna. We really appreciate it. All right. In our agenda, we are at a point where we can take a short break, thank goodness. I'd like to, again, thank everyone for the presentations this morning and this afternoon. We will recess for a short break. We can reconvene. I'm betting we can do it in about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes at the most. So real close to 2:15. Give people just enough time to, well, make their transitions away from us, and then we'll reconvene at 2:15. Gives us about 15 minutes.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
Can we just plow through and get it done and get out of here, or?
That is always an option. I love your work ethic.
Let's do that if there's no objection on the dais here or in the public comment.
I'll ask, are there any pressing needs to take a break other than to wave goodbye to our colleague as she attends to her Sacramento fatigue?
If that's the case, I would suggest that we move forward with public comment and then item 6, and then we adjourn.
Very well then, we will move forward. I'd like to thank the members of the public who have joined us here today and ask if you have any public commentary on any of the agenda items for which we discussed, that you would ascend to the podium and identify yourself and address the Joint Advisory Committee members. Please step forward. We'd love to hear from you. We would like to ask you to make your comments brief and that we limit speakers to 2 minutes each. Hello and welcome.
Hi. We'll see how I can do this. I'll try. Kit Alvarez with San Bernardino County ROP. And I wanted to say I appreciated hearing about the Perkins 5 and the shifts in policy and those essential questions. I think we have a heavy lift coming. I'm also excited about being able to use immersive technologies to expand access and opportunities to our students in San Bernardino County who are in those remote and isolated locations. I wanted to share that I found a great deal of irony today in the concept of duplication of effort, when back at my desk I have 2 grant applications for competitive grants to fund my same programs for sustainability and program improvement. And so that is not, that's duplication of effort right now in our 2 grant system. And further complicated by doing letters of intent that may or may not have any bearing on my grant outcome. I'd rather be spending my time with my community college and helping them to understand articulation as it relates to programs where articulation is not contingent upon my teacher having a master's degree, but rather intended to be based on the student outcomes and course rigor, and our courses meet industry standards, and that it should be based on that. And so we spend an awful lot of time and effort, and in my whole career as an administrator, 30 years, we are not moving the needle on articulation in a very effective manner. And so I'm glad that we're still talking about it, but I look forward to moving that needle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Sun, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just so that, thank you for the comments. Actually that reminds me of something that we might want to also look at is waivers of our institution's policies in circumstances where we need to do articulation, and that could be credential requirements, it could be whatever it is, so.
Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome.
Hello. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Alana Bui with the California Department of Consumer Affairs, and I really have to commend everyone here in this room for the wonderful work that's been done and the work that's going to be continuing on. The department is the regulatory entity that oversees 37 regulatory programs here in California that issue professional licenses. And The department in its current work implementing Assembly Bill 2105 is working to ensure that California has an adequate number of healthcare professionals to meet the demand in the next decade and beyond. So one of the things that we're doing is we're working with our licensing programs to develop or to identify these career pathways, and then working to better align curriculum and licensing requirements. And we realize that we can't have those conversations without looking to you folks with the work that you're doing. So I'm looking forward to continuing conversations to see how we can leverage our AB 2105 efforts to help answer some of the questions that you all are asking here today.
I didn't catch your last name.
Alana Bowie, B-U-I.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Alana.
you.
Do we have any other members of the public that would like to offer commentary?
Hi, this is Deborah Jones from Peralta Community College District, and I have some public comment also representing a couple of other people who were here that have left. I have 4 points. One is the crosswalk of metrics that was at last meeting. If that can be sent out again, if there were changes on that. And also I know that from having worked at CDE and the Chancellor's office, there's a crosswalk of sector alignment. If that can be part of a packet, that would be wonderful. One comment on work-based learning, and we talked a little bit about the risks involved. The Community College Foundation has an employer of record program that mitigates the liability to employers, and I know many of our colleges and schools are using that through the CPT grant, so it's just an extra resource. And then a couple of us talked about wanting to see a stronger focus on adult education throughout the principles and the work of this committee, and a focus on impact and outcomes and data-driven decisions and decision-making. Also, the outcomes and impacts that employers wanted. We talked about the principles that you've put together, and thank you so much for that work. And there's one area where it talks about incentivizing behaviors and relationships, and we just want to press for a focus on incentivizing outcomes and keeping outcomes at the center of our work. And folks, I was at CDE 10, 12 years ago and at the Chancellor's office, and I just want to thank you for the good work of this committee.
And we'd like to thank you for holding down the fort in Oakland for us and providing us with those valuable public comments. Thank you very much. I hope for everyone who's been here that the meeting has been informative. I know from my point of view, I feel like I'm on information overload right now because there's so much to consider. But what an exciting time in career education, and an exciting time to be talking about the pathways that we are going to make huge inroads on. If there's nothing further in terms of public commentary, I want to thank everyone who attended today and see if there are any final thoughts or reflections that our committee members would like to share at this time. Member Fawn?
We're talking about discussion of next step and schedule of future meetings.
We're almost to schedule of future meetings. We're not quite there yet.
None except for that.
Okay, I'll come back to you then on that one. Vice Chair Sun?
No, I just, I think this is a very productive meeting as well, and just really looking forward to working with all of our Community College Board of Governor members here over this next year. I think we're in for an exciting time.
And I'll ask Member Rucker when she returns, but while we're transitioning, I'll ask staff to discuss the direction and topics for future meetings. Donna, would you like to start? That's okay. See, we're ahead of schedule a little bit because we didn't take the break, and that's okay. It appears as though Member Fawn would really like to talk about the meeting dates.
Yeah, I guess we've kind of fluctuated on dates and whatnot, and the dates indicated here on page 3 and page 4 are the meeting dates. I guess from my vantage point, I can make these dates, but if I can ask that the meeting not start at 10, but at noontime for all of these February, March, and April meetings, then that way I can attend to my classes and then come here by noon to partake in the discussions. That's just a request on my part.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanted to ask staff, could we poll to make sure, and I think the only reason we did 10 to 3 is because we have folks who travel from Southern California, and so it gets them back on a flight where it's not super late. But
Yes, we can do that, and I brought Lisa up because Lisa is doing the logistics around the planning and timing and dates and all of that. So I think the last thing that we did was send out a survey of dates, correct?
Yeah, we sent out a survey of dates, and that's where we came up with the following 4 dates of February 19th, March 11th, April 22nd, and May 29th. We will be sending out another survey to schedule meetings for, what are the next 3? Let's see, July and November, May, July, and November, to continue for the rest of the year. I did send a survey out asking if we wanted to move the meeting time from 9 to 2 or 10 to 3. The majority of members responded 10 to 3, but we can look at that again, member Fawn.
Kind of like that buffet analogy, 9 to 2, 10 to 3, 11 to 4, 12 to 5, and see which gets the most amount of bites. All right, anything in terms of giving us additional direction and topics for future meetings, Donna?
I think we're going to probably cover that at the debrief. I think we got some information today on some areas that you want to look at, in addition to making some recommendations for you to give feedback. Certainly on the next meeting on the 19th, depending on the time, we will have a draft transition for a plan for you to give feedback on.
And we'll also be giving you the feedback you requested on the public feedback on the principles as well. Those will definitely be for the next meeting.
Yes.
Very good. Are there any other items that need to come before us this afternoon? Well, then, can I give you a heartfelt appreciation for your indulgence and patience as I ascend to be as great as our former chair and former vice chair? I cannot thank you enough. You set an amazing example. I hope to emulate it in the future. I want to thank everyone who took time out of their busy schedules to be with us here today. And I hope that we are together again on Tuesday, February 19th at some point in time. I will remind everyone that the posted meeting dates are tentative. They tend to be updated based on availability and our insistence on maintaining quorum to get business done. And I wish everyone safe travels. Patricia, did you have something you wanted to add before we adjourn?
Yes, I do. I just confirmed with both members Ortiz-Lecon and Rucker, and I believe, Member Sun, you are available on the 19th starting at 12 o'clock is, I think, what we were talking about. So they are available from 12 to 5 on the 19th.
And I believe I heard Member Fawn say he's available from 12 to 5. It sounds like we've got a date. Fantastic. Excellent. Well, then, if there's no further meeting to come before this board, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. And a race to, and a second?
Second.
Therefore, we are adjourned. Thank you, folks.